Happy Thursday. Welcome in. It's Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan. Jake is out, in case you couldn't already tell. My name is Derek Schultz, also known as Jake Query's best friend. He will never admit such, but it's true. We're BFFs. We used to host a thing together. Actually, we still do once a week. Shameless plug. QueryandSchultz.com if you want to check that out. But happy to be Jake's summer fill-in today, and happy to have you along as well. What's a beautiful summer afternoon in downtown Indianapolis. Nice and sunny. It's hot. High 80s. It's sweaty. It's all those things. But still, really nice summer day as we get ready for what's generally a pause in the sports calendar. Not going to lie, this was always, when I was still doing this on a daily basis back in my former life, this was always kind of like the dead period of the season when we were thinking to ourselves, okay, like, what are we going to do content-wise? Because Pacers aren't playing at least meaningful games, even though the Pacers Summer League starts later on this afternoon. Colts have basically almost like a moratorium period right now. Players are in the wind. Coaches are in the wind. There's really no NFL news happening because everybody's preparing to come to Westfield and come to camp in a couple of weeks. And then the Fever weren't the topic that clearly they are now. We're talking 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. They weren't the topic that they are now. Baseball, this isn't really much of a baseball town. I'm not going to get on here and talk about, hey, guess what? What are the Cincinnati Reds doing? Call us right now, 239-1070. Some people care about that. Some people don't. And the college stuff is not really happening, right? Purdue, IU, football, basketball, the major revenue sports, not really popping as well. But I feel like this summer is almost unique in the sense that we had the Pacers carry us all the way through, not only from like the 500, which is generally like the latest point that they go, right? Because the Pacers, in their history, a lot of times they get to the Eastern Conference Finals, you lose in the Eastern Conference Finals, and you reset. But to get to the NBA Finals, and that got so stretched out, it was like a 2.5-week series, 7-game series, and now bang, it's offseason, it's free agency, and it's summer league, and it's like there's not even a Pacers offseason. I mean, I'm sure in August, I guess there'll be some time to just kind of catch your breath a little bit. But there hasn't really been an offseason here because they've carried us this long. And now the Colts are 2 weeks away, and there's I don't know, excitement is the right word. Hope springs eternal. I'll be nice. Hope springs eternal when it comes to the Colts. So maybe you're just naturally a little bit more optimistic on July 10th than you are by the time October 10th or certainly December 10th rolls around for the Colts. So you want to hang on to that. And then there's some other NCAA news, potentially this tournament expansion, which could happen as soon as this week. They're meeting, all of that. So it just feels like there's actually a lot cooking right now. We've got Eddie Garrison on the ones and twos as always as well.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Derek, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. This is I'm having a great day. I took a half day at work to do this, to fill in. I do like filling in once in a while. And I like that Todd still calls me to fill in because that's no guarantee. Todd doesn't like everybody. I feel like he likes me. He's listening right now, so I guess I can say that.
It's because you work at Purdue. That's why he likes you.
Yeah, I think that's like 95% of it as well. But we're also doing I have just the best group of, my son is 8 years old, and he goes to St. Thomas Aquinas School, and we just have the absolute best group of parents in that grade, in that school. Like, just truly awesome, fun, successful, wonderful people. And we're doing a dad's night, which isn't just the second, well, he's going to be in third grade, so rising third grade dads, but it's the dads for the entire school. And we're not even Catholic, and we love St. Thomas, and we're doing an Indians game dads outing tonight too. So I've got the show, and then I've got the dads outing later tonight, which is nice. Not that I don't, love my wife and son, but it's nice to kind of get to do things socially on your own. When you're 42, you don't get to do that as much, where you just kind of find time to, like, guys being dudes and just hang. So we're going to go to the Red Key and do all that, crush a burger, hop on the Red Line, and then go downtown and go to the Tribe game tonight where it's Thirsty Thursday. It's $3 Busch Light cans. So we're going to do that tonight at the Indians game. So it'll be a lot of fun. So looking forward to obviously doing the rest of the show until 3 p.m., but then Dad's night, it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. We're happy to have you along. Matt Taylor, the radio voice of the Colts, is going to join us about a half an hour from now, 12:30-ish. right around there. And we'll talk about training camp, but I'll be honest, and we'll talk about this with Matt. The reason why I thought of having him on the show was last night, Frank Layden passed away. If you're a hoops head, you probably know who Frank Layden is, or if you're an old guy or older guy, you probably know Frank Layden. He was the head coach of the Utah Jazz in the 1980s. He was Karl Malone's and John Stockton's first head coach. He transitioned from being a head coach into being an executive, and he was around the league for a long, long time. But anyway, he passed away at the age of 93, had this long, fulfilling life. He was one of the NBA's true characters in that time. Like, there's this story that when he was the head coach of the Jazz, they were getting blown out by somebody, I think it was like the Lakers or one of the powers of the time, and he left the game and went and, like, ordered a pizza and then came back. Can you imagine that happening, like, right now? Like, you know, I don't know, and Rick Carlisle, Frank Vogel, anybody like that, they just leave. They order a pizza, they come back, they're getting blown out. You imagine the blowback that you get from that, but, you know, that's what used to, I guess, happen 40 years ago. But he did a series of basketball videos when I was a little kid, like late 80s, early 90s, called Dazzling Dunks and Basketball Bloopers, where he and Marv Albert hosted it, and they would, like, go around the league and they would ask players, hey, what do you like more, dunks or bloopers? And it had, you know, cameos from, like, Bill Walton and John Sally and guys like that. And it was all kinds of highlights as well. And it's hard to explain, like, if you're a younger person, like, even if you're Eddie's age, like, not that you're super young, Eddie. Are you Gen Z technically or no?
I honestly can't remember.
Or would you be like a young millennial? Maybe? What year were you born?
98.
Okay, I got to actually look at that then. But regardless, I'm talking like the super young people. You have access to whatever you want now, right? You can just go on YouTube. You can click a highlight. You can see a dunk, something from last night, something from last week, something from 50 years ago. You look it up, bang, it's there on your phone. When I was 7 years old and 8 years old in 1989, 90, you couldn't do that. So these VHS tapes that had, like, highlights and things like that, we would just watch them over and over and over and over again. So I was mentioning last night on X that, hey, rest in peace to Frank Layden. I was responding to the Utah Jazz post about it. And a bunch of people, including Matt Taylor, were like, oh, my God, I had that video. I watched that video. So we'll talk to Matt Taylor about old sports highlight videos, but obviously talk about Colts and storylines. And I do think, as apathetic as I am, full disclosure, I am completely apathetic about the Colts going into this season. This is the least excited I've been about an Indianapolis Colts season in the 20 years that I've lived here. Least excited. That said, there are still training camp things and Westfield things that I am intrigued about, that I am, I guess, looking forward to because I don't know how it's going to play out. Like the tight end room. How is that going to look? The quarterback battle. Duh. That's going to be the biggest storyline of all. Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, right? I am genuinely intrigued by some of those type things. But I just can't get on board with the, hey, Colts might have a really great season this year. It's just been kind of like 10 years of malaise and this lost decade. And it's hard for me to kind of mentally climb out of that without actually seeing the results. Instead of, just blindly hoping, I'm waiting to see and then I'll believe. Like, that's where I am right now with the Colts, because it's just been a lot of unfulfilled expectations and unfulfilled optimism from the 2015 offseason all the way until now. But we'll talk about all that with Matt Taylor coming up at 12:30. I'd mentioned some NCAA news. I'm still trying to get a handle on when this is going to happen, but you've probably seen this because it's been talked about now for weeks. They're talking about expanding the NCAA tournament, the men's tournament, which means, the fact they're talking about it means it's going to happen, okay? Like, I am resigned to the fact that this is happening and we are powerless to stop it, and it doesn't matter how much public opinion is like 95-5 in favor of keeping it to 68. We're going to 72 or we're going to 76, one of those things. I reached out to Mike DeCourcy the other day, prominent college basketball expert, Sporting News, BTN, Fox Sports, all that. I said, hey, can you come on the show? Can we talk about tournament expansion? He is staunchly against tournament expansion. But Mike's a really smart guy, much smarter than me, so we're going to talk about that with him coming up at 1 o'clock. But also I want to get his take on Cam Jones, the new Pacers rookie who may or may not play in year one here. I'm interested to see what happens in Vegas because when you take Halliburton out of the equation now at point guard, you have Nembhard, and he's going to step in, right? You got McConnell under contract, but then it's kind of wide open after that. You need somebody else. And Jones was a combo guard at Marquette, but they asked him to facilitate more last year, and he was able to do that and had good assist numbers and all that. You know, he's a guy that does everything well, kind of a jack of all trades. And I wonder if he's going to kind of factor into that being a rotational player at some point, maybe not from day one, but some point this season with the Pacers, and get Mike's take on that. And then on Purdue and IU and just kind of season outlook stuff. You know, obviously both of those programs in very different places right now, with Purdue having legitimate national championship aspirations and Indiana just trying to field a roster for next year and kind of, you know, rip the Mike Woodson Band-Aid off and start over, as we've seen several iterations of them trying to start over in this, you know, 21st century where the program keeps trying to find its way. But Mike DeCourcy will join us coming up at 1 o'clock. And then we'll talk Pacers and Fever with Tony East, the Myles Turner stuff. You know, Rick Carlisle had some comments, which I want to touch on here in just a little bit, but also the Fever, who just, ugh. If you tuned in yesterday around this time expecting to hear Jake, you got John and Bria on the call, and it was just an ugly performance against a Golden State team that's they're okay, but 80-61, it was really never close outside of the first quarter, and just another kind of performance where the Fever just sort of inexplicably sleptwalked through it. You know, they go out and they win the Commissioner's Cup, and then they really just laid it on Vegas. And you thought to yourself, okay, like, and Caitlin Clark's coming back, and they're going to shift things into gear here. And then they take on really a not very good Sparks team, and they don't play well in that game, and they lose at home. And then they have yesterday's performance. You're just like, it just feels like a team where it, and I understand Clark's been injured, and there are other things, you know, the Bonner situation, God, what a mess that was. There are some other things that have happened that have, I think, can be explained in the context of why the Fever are where they are this season at 9-10. But I think overall, if you just watch them and you're just kind of following the day-to-day, it just doesn't quite look right. There's just something that's not there. And I want to see if Tony has a take on that of you know, is it a Steph White thing? Is it a rotation thing? Do they need to move some pieces around with Ari and Lexi, and, you know, what can fix this? Because it's got to be better than this. They got to play better, consistent basketball. They're too talented to have games where you're questioning effort and things like that. So we'll talk about that with Tony along with the Pacer stuff. But I wanted to touch on the Rick Carlisle comments. Eddie, I'm sure that you saw these as well. We don't happen to have audio. I'm putting you on the spot here. We don't happen to have that audio, do we?
I can get it.
Okay. If you want to, and if you can find it, great, and we can play it. But essentially, and I understand that some folks listening to this are probably like, oh God, like the Myles Turner thing that happened a week ago. Like, let's put it to bed. This is sort of the last of it, right? Where last week you're reacting to the initial shock of it, and then, okay, what are the Pacers going to do? And they make the trade for Jay Huff, and then we talked about the center rotation and all that. I know Jake and John and obviously James and Kevin and everybody in the morning, they've talked about all those things. But now it's like the why. Why did this happen, and how did this happen? And I thought Rick Carlisle's comments were very interesting. He appeared on the Green Light podcast yesterday, and here's what he had to say, his reason to believe what happened with Myles Turner and how it went down.
Losing Myles Turner is a significant loss for our team. I mean, the guy's been a terrific player. He had a great season. And look, we were talking to them, meaning his agent, about him returning. And, you know, really kind of out of nowhere, Milwaukee decided to waive Damian Lillard and stretch his money out over whatever number of years you can do it by rule. And then they created space to sign Myles. And so I think what probably happened, and this is part of negotiation in any sport, you know, a team will say, hey, look, we have this offer. It's this much over this many years. But if we make this offer, we need to know that you're going to take it and not shop it. I believe that that's what probably happened with Milwaukee. They just jumped at it, and there's never a chance to counter. Those things happen. And when they do, you just got to keep going.
So interesting. And I don't need to tell you guys, Rick Carlisle has been around the block. Rick Carlisle knows not only more X's and O's basketball, but the way the business operates more than any of us will ever know. Certainly me, certainly Eddie, certainly anybody in the listening audience will ever. I mean, I don't know. I guess Donnie Walsh or Kevin Pritchard, somebody like that could be listening to this, and maybe they know just as much as Carlisle, but he knows. I don't think he offers that explanation unless there was something concrete behind it. Now, he probably didn't want to offer that somebody told him that, or he had a conversation about that with somebody else, or he heard it secondhand or firsthand or whatever else. But I don't think you offer that up in a podcast, knowing that somebody's going to hear that and see that, and it's going to make news. Like, the Indy Star, like all the Pacers publications pick that up as well. That, hey, Rick Carlisle said this about Myles Turner. You don't offer that. Rick's a smart guy. You don't offer that unless you have a pretty good reason to believe that that's how things went down. And it's plausible, right, that the Bucks went to Turner and they said, look, we're going to do this crazy thing, which is stretch and wave Dame, right? We're going to do this crazy thing. And in order for us not to look like complete idiots for doing this crazy thing, we have this offer for you. But you have to say yes to this offer right now. We have to know that you're doing this, because we're not doing this crazy thing unless you take this. We're not going to do this crazy thing and then offer you this, have you shop it around, and then lose out to you while we did this crazy thing and just kind of left holding our you-know-what, because we have nothing to do with this cap space because there's nothing else out there. So I think that's a completely plausible situation. But again, what we've kind of ignored in this whole thing is so much of this has been about, oh, what did the Pacers do here, and how did they handle this situation, and what was Pritchard's thinking, Buchanan's thinking, and what did the team offer, and all of that. This is a two-way street. Myles Turner wasn't a restricted free agent like he's been in the past. There was no DeAndre Ayton offer sheet here like there was in the past. He was allowed to take what he wanted to take. He was a UFA, I believe, for the first time in his career, an unrestricted free agent, right? So what we didn't really talk about here was the feeling was, and the reports were as well, so this maybe was part of why the perception was this way, that Myles Turner was happy and was going to come back. And maybe that was the case before the Halliburton injury. I don't know. We'll never know, right? Clearly, the Halliburton injury changed the context for everything, not just the Turner situation, for everything. It's changed the entire context around the 25-26. It can change the entire context around the Pacers window and the franchise and everything. We all know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It changed everything. So certainly it had a hand. Pacers can say whatever they want. I know Kevin Pritchard said on Monday, that didn't really change. Yeah, of course it did. It changed everything. It changed everything that the Pacers are going to do. Not only now, not only in the past couple of weeks, but moving forward. For the next couple of years, it's going to change what they do. But at the end of the day, maybe Turner didn't want to be here anymore. Maybe after 10 years and being 48 minutes away from an NBA championship, this was a good time to make that break. Not that he hated the Pacers or he hated the fans or I don't think any of those things are true. Just sometimes you feel to yourself, hey, I'm 10 years in. It's time for a change. It's time for something new. And I do think we would all agree that the Pacers and Turner relationship was interesting. And interesting in the sense that Myles was constantly part of trade rumors. He took a lot of criticism, both fair and unfair, during his time here. I mean, hell, think about the finals, and he was bad in the finals, okay? He was bad. It's a bad series. He was great against Cleveland. Had a really good season. Had a good playoffs before then. Really, as a whole, he was a big part of the reason why they made the finals. So I don't want to just focus in on 2 weeks there, but he caught a lot of arrows from the fan base and the whole deal. And hypothetically, again, because we don't know, and maybe Turner will talk about this when we get his side of the story when he has an introductory press conference with the Bucks. But I think at the time the negotiations began, the Pacers believed they were dealing from a position of strength, which they were. Everybody thought that they were. They thought they were. And they looked at it and they said, Brooklyn and Detroit are two of the teams that could sign you, right, but they're making other moves. And so this is the offer. And we feel pretty good about the fact that it's going to be the best offer for Myles Turner, not knowing that Milwaukee was going to do something reckless, which is exactly what they did, and wave and stretch Dame and create all this space and kind of swoop in. And I do wonder if part of this is not only the take it or leave it deal from Milwaukee coming and being a great deal, but part of it being, let's say that the number was 23, 24 million. Let's just say, just play along with me. And Turner thinks that his value is closer to 30. And he looks at the Nasri deal and all this other stuff. And, you give him that offer, and then after 10 years, maybe Turner's just like, you know what, guys, I'm out. Okay? Thanks, but I'm gone. Could have called his agent right there and said, hey, the first great offer that we get, we're jumping at it. And the Milwaukee offer, it's a great offer. Player option for the fourth year, $27 million. It's a great offer. It's more than we thought it was. When it was first reported, it's more money. So I can't blame him for doing that. I can't even blame him for not allowing the Pacers to counter, because let's also say, and again, I'm just throwing a bunch of hypothetical scenarios here because we don't know, right? We don't know. We could talk about what's plausible and what's not implausible about how this all played out, but we don't know. Let's say that Turner had allowed the Pacers to counter. And let's say that the Pacers then counter and they up their offer and it matches Milwaukee's offer. Am I right in saying Turner then would look worse for taking the Milwaukee offer, right, and running? I mean, he already is catching some criticism for doing it the way that he did and handling the well. He didn't let the Pacers counter. What happened to loyalty? And blah, 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 blah. He's already taking it for there. So by just not even allowing the counter to happen, if that's indeed how it played out, I actually think that makes it a more defensible move. It's not even about being defensible. If you're Myles Turner, who cares? Who cares what some fill-in sports talk host thinks about the decision that you made? Who cares? What somebody on X thinks. Oh, Myles Turner's not loyal, whatever, screw him, he was terrible in the finals, we don't need him. Who cares? If I'm signing a $100 million deal, who cares? Why would I care about that? He wanted to do what was best for him, whatever the motivation was. But I do think that if you're putting a gun to my head and asking me, what do you think happened with the Turner situation? I think the Pacers went to him with an offer that he felt like was low. Whether you think it's low or whatever else, whatever, it doesn't matter. And I think he was ready to jump at the first really good offer, and Milwaukee comes in with the big offer, take it or leave it, he takes it. But he probably takes it anyway, even if it wasn't a take it or leave it deal. I don't know. I'm not entirely certain that he allows the Pacers the chance to counter. Because once the first offer happened, and if he felt like it was low, and even if he felt like it was low to the point that he was insulted by the offer, then you're not even willing to listen to the second offer. You're walking out of the room right there, and that's it. You're packing your bags, you're packing your Legos, and you're going. And I think that there's a really good chance that that's how it went down, and that's unfortunate. But again, I think this is survivable for the Pacers. I don't think that the center rotation as it is going to give you even 50, 60% of what Turner does, at least not initially. But that said, this is a much bigger deal if Tyrese Halliburton is healthy and you let Turner walk out the door for nothing. Then the sky would really be falling. That'd be a big problem if they went back and did that. But luckily, I think it's survivable for them. We're going to talk plenty more Pacers. We're going to talk a little more Fever. Like I said, Tony East coming up later on in the show. But next, Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts, will join us. Training camp right around the corner, and we'll discuss. It's Query & Company here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. Rolling along on this lovely Thursday. Thanks so much for joining us. It's Query and Company. 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. Eddie Garrison is here. Jake Query is not. He is going over to Manchester to see Oasis. I love Jake. Like I mentioned, we are best friends.
Now, you don't have a god-awful British accent that you do either, do you?
Oh, God. Did he do the, hello, governor? And yeah, he does.
You like the Beatles.
He does too, right? He does like an old man British accent, and then he does like a younger guy, but they're like the same. They're both obnoxious. But we're going to try to be a little more lively with the rejoiners because Jake only plays like dinosaur rock, and he thinks he likes hip hop, but it's all like 40 years ago. No offense to like Run DMC and stuff like that, but
he'll do that thing where he stands up and just starts snapping. I'm like, oh, stop it.
Oh God, he's the worst dancer in human history. Yeah, he has no rhythm or anything like that. Jake's a very talented guy, but yeah, he's not a dancer. No rhythm. I wish Jake was as cool as Jake thinks he is, but unfortunately he's not. Somebody that is cool, and we were talking about how cool we were last night in a social media discussion about old VHS tapes. He is the voice of the Colts. He's about to be a very busy man as we are only a handful of weeks away from training camp starting in Westfield. His name is Matt Taylor, and he joins us now on the guest line. So, Matt, I want to get people in on this because they're going to be expecting me to ask a Colts question right off the jump, but you and I were going back and forth on old sports VHS tapes because of Frank Layden's passing and dazzling dunks and basketball bloopers. And since this is Jake's show, I'm like, well, I don't have to lead with something like sports related. It's Jake's show. He always leads with off the wall crap, right? How amazing were those sports VHSs, man? Like, it was the golden era, wasn't it, to be growing up?
I mean, first of all, if we're going to make fun of people's musical preferences on this show, then like right off the jump, I have no chance, like zero shot. All right, so let's just get that out of the way because, most people do not jive what I want to listen to. I found that out in the hard way this past week on vacation with my in-laws. Like I want to listen to music when I'm relaxing. They want peace and quiet. It's just a little bit of a different dynamic. But no, I mean, those VHS tapes, man, you talked about how you wore them out. I wore them out too. I was 5, 6 years old, and I don't know how my dad got a hold of them. Maybe he got them at a sports store like the old Galleons back in the day. But I wore those out just like you did, man. And, that's how I found out who Marv Albert was. That's how I found out that I could actually impersonate Marv Albert because he was the host on those shows. He was.
That's right.
I mean, they were so scripted and hokey and corny, but when you're a kid, you don't understand that. You don't know the difference. But that was the golden age of my childhood, watching shows like that and old reruns of NFL films and Super Bowl highlights and they were back on ESPN in the middle of the afternoon back in the day, like when you get home from school or in the middle of summer around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You didn't have anything else to do, right? You didn't grow up with a tablet or a smartphone or AOL Instant Messenger, man. You just watched TV and, or sticking a VHS tape in this case. So, when you sent that out last night, like you cut me right to the core. I was speaking your language.
It was cool to hear from so many people that were like, oh my God, like I watched that too. But, and because we're both dads now, I'm just kind of jealous of our kids have such easy access. Like my kid's like, hey, Dad, can I see the Jazz Chisholm homer from last night? And it takes me 2 seconds to bring it up on my phone. And at that time, it was such a novelty, right? To see like highlights and things like that. Because if you weren't watching the 6 o'clock news or something, or Sports Center right when it was starting, sometimes even if you were a Pacers fan, Sports Center wouldn't even show the Pacers highlights, so you wouldn't even see them.
No, that's a great point because I remember, in the heyday of Smith's, Davis, brothers. I mean, if you wanted to watch a Pacer highlight, to your point, there's no YouTube. There's no, snap your finger and pull up, Amazon Fire Stick and then search it through your TV. You had to wait. This is back in the day when ESPN would show the Sports Center, that hour-long Sports Center in the morning. They would show it all the way up until like noon or 1 o'clock. So if you missed it, you had to wait an entire hour to see those highlights from the night before. And I'm old enough to remember when the Pacers weren't even on TV in this market. The home games, anyways, weren't on TV. They would show the road games for some inexplicable reason, but the home games were still blacked out. That's why when your dad would come home from work and have like novelty tickets from the partners down the hallway that couldn't use those Tuesday night tickets against, the Raptors or whatever, and they'd float him tickets and he would take me. Like, that was the biggest thing because you got to actually go see the Pacers at home at Market Square Arena playing on that court that you didn't get to see on TV. I'm so glad, Derek, that you and I grew up when we did, on the precipice of, cell phones that people use now as walkie-talkies, and people get their podcasts on their phones and stuff like that. I'm just glad I grew up as a child of the 90s where we were predominantly outside in the summer. We were playing capture the flag, or we were playing in the sandlot in the backyard, wiffle ball or baseball or whatever it was. We just invented so many games because we had to, because we were bored and we had to keep ourselves going in the summertime before we all went back to school.
Yeah, and I'm also glad, even when we got older, that there was no social media, so there's no documented evidence of me with like a tongue ring and a backwards upside down visor. You know what I mean? So, multiple reasons why I'm glad that we grew up in the era that we did. But Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts, joins us, and let's talk Colts. And I'll be honest here, Matt, and I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer, but I'm having trouble getting excited about this season. Just the product of the last couple of years, and they're coming close, but are they really that close? And there just doesn't seem to be as much oomph as in past years. So I want you to help me put on my optimism hat here and help sell me. What are you excited to see? Who are you excited to see? Hope springs eternal, right? It's a new season, so it's you turn the page, a fresh outlook. What are you hopeful about heading to Westfield?
Well, I'm with you, right? I mean, there's a lot of things last year that, to your point, they've been in NFL purgatory, whatever you want to call it, that gray area, that middle zone. Whatever you want to deem it, they're right there because they missed the playoffs 4 straight years, and 3 of those 4 seasons, they've won at least 8 games. So it's kind of like the bad spot to be in because you're not making the playoffs, but you're not picking in the top 5 to get, those instant gratification players at wide receiver or quarterback or, defensive end or top cornerbacks. You get what I'm saying. So I think this year what you're hopeful for is that the problem areas that occurred last year can smooth themselves out and get better performances because this is a hill that I'm dying on all off season. I've said it since January, since last year ended. If that was a playoff team last year, that was a team that was good enough to make the postseason in 2024 if 2 big things had been better. 1, overall better consistency on defense. And number 2, and this is probably should be number 1, is just more consistent quarterback play. Mm-hmm. I can think back to a couple of games last year that really plagued them in terms of why they missed out on the playoffs. You go back to week 2 and you say, well, week 2, how can week 2 be such a critical game in the big grand scheme of things? Well, it was. You're playing the Packers and they run for 300 yards and you felt like 1 billion yards in that first half with Josh Jacobs, but they still only lost the game 16-10, right? So it's not all on the defense. If the quarterback play in that game was a little bit better, maybe you win that game and steal that game on the road with Green Bay playing a backup quarterback at the time. Both Houston games, you lose those games by a combined 5 points. Those were just back-breaking games. Obviously, the Giants game, late in the season, uneven play on defense, inconsistent quarterback play in that game from Joe Flacco. The Minnesota game sticks out to me. The Denver game on the road sticks out to me. The defense was up and down in that game. Offense was up and down. That was the game where Jonathan Taylor drops the ball at the goal line as he's going in to score a touchdown. Just so many things you can point to throughout the course of a 17-game season. But this quarterback battle between Richardson and Jones, I think, is going to be really beneficial to the team. Both guys have a tremendous, a fairly big chip on their shoulder for different reasons, with Richardson trying to prove that he can stay healthy. He's only played in 15 games in his first 2 years in the NFL. Daniel Jones has a chip on his shoulder trying to change the narrative and the perception of how he's viewed nationally around the NFL based on his exodus from New York. So I think both guys are really motivated, and, say what you want about Jones. He does have a little bit of a leg up because of Richardson's missed time at the end of the minicamp period in the spring. But he's NFL level accurate. We saw that here in the springtime. Twice in his career, he's completed at least 67% of his passes. You can win with that number. And I think he's got better overall weapons in Indy than he did with the Giants. So I think that matters too. But long story short, I just think this quarterback battle between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones is far from being decided. Training camp's going to be fascinating when it comes to that. And then defensively, Lou Anarumo's here now. So new scheme, excitement, some new personnel on that side of the ball. The Colts going big-time bold in the secondary, bringing in Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward. Two big things for the Colts to even out this year on that side of the ball. One is put more pressure on the quarterback and not make it so easy for opposing quarterback to get into rhythm and, feel like they're in a groove and complete 70% of their passes, which is what they did last year. You're not going to win games when you're giving up the 30th best or second worst, depending on how you want to describe it, opposing quarterback completion percentage. And then secondly, you got to get much better on third down. And that comes with the skies in the secondary, being better against the run on first and second down. Colts last year ranked 30th in third down defense, and they actually allowed the second most third downs converted to opposing offenses a year ago. So those are the two big ones when it comes to kind of overhauling the hallmark problems of this defense. So if you smooth those two things out, one big one on offense and obviously a couple of big ones on defense, you've got the personnel here to make the playoffs. The core is here. You got guys in their primes that play premium positions that are ready to go. You just need the quarterback, obviously, to find some more consistency and make more plays, from a continuity perspective on defense for this 2025 season.
Yeah, I want to talk about the defense because you mentioned the inconsistency last year. Like when they were good, they could be good. When they were bad, like the Giants game, all hell broke loose. Or really, remember the middle portion of the Patriots game, I was like, what is happening? It was an avalanche, it felt like a lot of times when things would go poorly for them. And you mentioned Daniel Jones, and I think what he does for the quarterback room is he raises the floor, right? We still have Richardson with the ceiling, but with Jones, at least you have an idea what the floor is. And finding consistency, and you add Ward and you add Bynum. Ward obviously has been a big-time winner. He's won at the highest level, but Bynum was an every-week starter for a 13-win team and a 14-win team in Minnesota, so he's used to winning too. Do adding those two guys help from a consistency standpoint and just kind of raising the floor of what the defense could be, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think they help on so many different levels. First, it's just, more playmaking ability in the secondary, being able to get your more hands on the football, pass the defense, more takeaways, more interceptions. In the case of Charvarius Ward, hopefully it comes to fruition that he's able to, at times, maybe not exclusively, but at times be able to shadow another team's best weapon and take away another team's top wide receiver. That's been another hallmark problem for this team the last couple of years. The other team's best player would routinely have big games against the Colts. And that was frustrating because you knew going into the game, hey, we got to stop this guy. This is the biggest threat to us losing the game. And they would still go out there and perform at a high level. So I think those two guys in that regard are really big in the secondary. But I think with Lou Anarumo's ability to have veterans that he trusts to play and handle a lot on their plate in the secondary is going to be big, because when that defense in Cincinnati was humming, when they were playing at their best, they were able to disguise things, line guys up in different positions, and just create a little bit of a shadow of a doubt for that quarterback, and make that quarterback hitch and pause for just a quick millisecond. And Derek, in this league, that's all you need.
Yep.
So I think the secondary is going to be so pivotal to the Colts pass rush, and hopefully it allows those quarterbacks to kind of hitch in the pocket. And the two defensive tackles, Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner, you've got Neville Gallimore here now. Hopefully those guys that are pushing that pocket back into the quarterback can get home more often. That means big things for the defensive ends coming off on the edges too. So I just think, in most cases, defenses go from front to back. I think with the Colts, it may be going from back to front because of the strength of this defense with all the veterans you have now in that secondary. Don't forget about Kenny Moore II, Jalen Jones playing outside as well. I just think, definitively what I learned about this team on defense in the spring with this secondary is pretty darn good. They got a lot of depth, and it's going to be hard for the Colts to make some tough cuts at that position once the preseason is over.
Yeah, you talk about tough cuts, and Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts, joins us. That tight end room, outside of Tyler Warren will play a prominent role. I can't think of any other absolute statements that I would make. It feels like everything else is kind of up for grabs. Is that maybe the most interesting position group going into Westfield just because of the unknown?
Yeah, it's definitely up there. And we were talking about this. We kind of kicked that around a couple of weeks ago on one of our radio shows. I could see the tight end position kind of being a roster construction casualty, if that makes sense, because you've got a lot of guys that are really good at some other positions that have contributed for you in years past. I mean, we just got done talking about corner. Justin Wally's here now. Corey Ballantyne comes over in free agency. You've got Juju Brents coming back. I mean, that's 6 guys right there. And typically you're only going to keep 5, maybe 6 tops. So, don't forget about Samuel Womack, who started a bunch of games last year for the Colts. I mean, that's a tough, crowded position. Same thing at wide receiver too. Anthony Gould's coming back. A.D. Mitchell's coming back. I think it's going to be one of those things where maybe the Colts consider keeping 6 receivers, maybe 4 running backs. And if you do all of that, there's a position group that's going to feel that, and I think it might be tight end. And the reason why I say that is because Tyler Warren, I think, is going to play such a prominent role within this offense, and he's going to get a high percentage of the tight end snaps anyways. Maybe you only keep 3 tight ends, and then within that, who are those 2 other guys? You would think Mo Alley-Cox, who comes back in free agency, is one of those guys because of what he can do in the blocking game and the running game. And then it's a fight for that 3rd spot. Will Mallory has showed some good flashes in the spring. Same thing with Drew Ogletree. Jelani Woods is oozing with potential, but he just hasn't been able to show it because of injuries. He hasn't played it down in each of the last 2 seasons with a variety of stuff. So that would not shock me if tight end kind of feels the crunch of the talent the Colts have at other positions on the roster.
Colts, one of the few teams that, and I love that they do this, they still allow access for fans when it comes to training camp and making them part of the experience. They're not doing things behind locked doors, which I hope folks here don't take for granted because that's not the case in the modern NFL for a lot of teams. What's this year's slate look like, Matt, up there in Westfield for fans to enjoy with you guys up there?
No, I appreciate that. And to your point, Derek, I did some research. So this is, it's not official, but what I dug up a couple weeks ago when the training camp schedule came out, my research showed that the Colts are one of only 6 teams in the NFL out of 32, one of only 6 that still do training camp, off-site at a local college, or in this case for the Colts up at Grant Park. And they've got fans up there consistently every single day. So if you go up to training camp, you're going to be up there with, a couple thousand people, 3,000-4,000 people, depending on the day and depending on what's going on. But it all starts July 23rd up at Grant Park in Westfield again. There's 13 open practices, and most of them are still free. Some of them have a nominal fee, and that's going to go to USA Football and their initiatives to grow the game of flag football. So it's going to a great cause. Some of the highlights include joint practice. That's actually going to be the last practice of training camp. That's August 14th against the Green Bay Packers. Joint practices are always widely attended. And then I think the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to this year, because it's new, it's the first time they've ever done this, a true night practice, right? They're bringing in the lights Thursday, July 31st, under the lights, 8 to 10. So you're still going to have your Indiana sunset in the background and in the twilight. And, maybe you throw in some John Mellencamp or some more classic rock that most people don't like that I do. But I think it's going to be great. It's sort of a new wrinkle up at training camp. So all the dates and all the practices and, by the way, Colt City's coming back too. That's that kids zone, that kids practice field right behind the grandstands up at Grant Park. Where the Colts practice, that's coming back. So there's truly something for everybody when it comes to training camp, because it's like you said, it's a perfect way to come watch your favorite players and your favorite team form and come together. And a lot of people get up there because for whatever reason they can't make it to a game at Lucas Oil Stadium. It's still a way to watch football and grow your affinity for this team. So families and young adults come out. It's perfect. And if you're just a hardcore football fan, obviously you stay for the X's and O's on the gridiron. So Colts.com/camp is the best way to get a one-stop shop for everything you need to know about camp. That's going to have the practice times, all the marketing initiatives and everything you need. You can also download your tickets there for camp as well. So again, Colts.com/camp is the place to go. And again, it starts July 23rd. It's going to be here before you know it.
Yeah, less than 2 weeks. And then, God, we're less than a month away from you and Coach in Baltimore, right? Preseason opener. It's weird to think. And then, of course, Colts.com. Always check out Matt's work, and not just Matt, but JJ and Casey and Gorman and Lara and the whole team. You guys do a wonderful job over there and talking about the team and generating all that great content. And can't wait for the season, man. Thanks so much for joining us. And I'm going to get back down my YouTube rabbit hole tonight and start watching more of those sports VHSs, all right?
Me too, man. I'm not going to lie. I looked it up last night on YouTube, and I watched about 10 minutes of it, and it just took me right back to 1989, 1991, whatever. I was 5, 6 years old, and I was loving every minute of it. So I really appreciated you putting that out and giving me a smile last night.
Yeah, I saw Xavier McDaniel, and I was just like, hell yeah, I'm in. Thanks, Matt.
All right, guys, be good.
That's our friend Matt Taylor, voice of the Colts, and we'll react to what Matt had to say about the Colts coming up here in just a few minutes. Also, top of the hour, we'll shift it to college basketball and potential NCAA tournament expansion with Mike DeCourcy of the Sporting News. It's Query and Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. looking fine. I feel like the consign. Oh, baby, I'm so into you. You know, everybody has that song. By the way, welcome back to Query & Company. This isn't Jake. This is Derek Schultz filling in. Everybody has, like, that artist or that song that if you're in your car alone and it comes on the radio and your windows are up and nobody's around, like, you're not shutting it off. You know, like that famous scene in Tommy Boy where Chris Farley and David Spade are in the car and they're like, oh, I'm cool with it if you are. Oh, man. Yeah, whatever. And then they start, like, crying and singing it at the top of their lungs, every lyric to the song. Mariah Carey's like that for me. Like, basically any Mariah Carey song. So not just Sweet Fantasy, but like the one that she did with Boyz II Men, One Sweet Day. That's a great song too. I celebrate her entire discography, Mariah Carey. Alanis Morissette's like that for me too. Where
Yes.
like, I'm in the car alone and like one hand in my pocket comes on. I'm like, I'm not changing this. I'm not changing this song. This rules. Jagged Little Pill was a great album. Was awesome. But, you know, like if I'm with my buddies, I'm probably not putting that on the playlist, you know? But yeah, definitely. I appreciate you playing that, Eddie. Did you know that I was a Mariah fan? Or did you just happen?
No.
Okay, yeah. Big time Mariah fan. Thanks so much to Matt Taylor for joining us. We're going to talk to Mike DeCourcy here in just a little bit, but a couple of things, because we only have a couple of minutes here, just to run down the big headlines of the day. The Fever rocked by Golden State and Caitlin Clark's return. They followed the Valkyries 80-61. Clark had 10 points, still struggled with her shot, 4 of 12 from the field. God, Fever were just bad yesterday. 30%, season low 61 points. They had a 9-point second quarter. They had a 10-point fourth quarter, so still a team that's just trying to kind of find its way. And we'll see if they can at 9 and 10. Pacers kick off their summer league play later this afternoon. They got Cleveland, 5 p.m. in Vegas. Tony East is there. He's going to talk to us coming up at 2 p.m. So we'll talk a little Summer Sirs with Tony East. The NCAA Division I Men's Basketball Committee set to decide on expanding the tournament to 72 or 76 teams, possibly as soon as today. We don't know. We're going to talk about that with Mike coming up here in just a little bit. And then finally, the bar continues to raise in annual pay, AAV, if you will. Devin Booker, now the gold standard in the league, the Sun Star, the next NBA mega deal. The new bar is set $72.5 million per year. $72.5 million for Devin Booker. What would you say? I think we are under a decade away from the first $100 million per year player. And it's probably going to be an NBA guy, right? I mean, 72.5. I understand like inflation and $72.5 million per year. Wild. That's about what Jake makes from IndyCar, actually. His side gig. I saw his W-2 one time. It's about what he makes there. Mike DeCourcy is going to join us next. We'll talk NCAA tournament expansion. We're going to talk Cam Jones. We're going to talk IU and Purdue outlook. Many, many things that Mike is an expert on, and we're going to talk hoops when we return. It's Query & Company. Derek Schultz filling in. Stick around here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Hour number 2, Query and Company, rolling along here on a lovely summer Thursday afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. Jake's gone. He's in England to check out Oasis, so I am his summer fill-in for today. My name is Derek Schultz, and like I said, appreciate you being here. We're bouncing around, so a little football, and we'll get into Pacers and Summer League and all of that with Tony coming up here. But, generally speaking, July is not really a time to be touching on a ton of college basketball, but we seem to be waiting for this NCAA tournament expansion decision to come, and a lot of people feel like maybe it's a fait accompli that it's going to 72 or it's going to 76. And one of the most outspoken critics of that, and there's been a lot of, many, I should say, outspoken critics when it comes to expanding the NCAA tournament field, is a guy that's been around the sport for decades. He covers college hoops for Sporting News, BTN, Fox Sports, and his name is Mike DeCourcy. He's kind enough to give a couple of minutes with us here on the guest line. And Mike, it's great to talk with you on the radio again. It's been a minute.
Yes, it has. It's nice to hear from you, Derek.
Like I mentioned, I think it's the understatement of the century to say that you've been pretty outspoken on your stance against the NCAA tournament expanding. And that's what I like about you. When you have an opinion, you let people know about it. But what is, you think, the most faulty reason for expanding the field that you've heard? And it's not that people have given very many impassioned defenses of expanding the field, but certainly there have been some out there that I know you've poked some holes in.
Well, the most absurd one is the idea that because Division I has grown by roughly 100 teams, maybe not quite that many. Since I started covering, I think they're probably around 270, 280, 38 years ago, and now it's around 360. And so we need more teams in the tournament. Why? Because like Bellarmine decided they wanted to be Division I. I mean, because really that is the entirety of that expansion is good for Bellarmine. I got no problem with it, but it doesn't need to be bigger because more low major teams decided to chase one bid glory. That's not a good enough reason to do this, but that's the preposterous reason they present to try to justify something that their fan base, we're not talking about this as a close call. I did a poll once. It was 91% against. Rob Doster did one yesterday. It was 94% against. Even Seth Davis, I bet if he had the courage to do a poll, and he's speaking to an audience that constantly hears from him how wonderful it would be, I bet you he would find out that the percentage against would be overwhelming. There's no demand for this. And when I say no demand, I'm talking about not just the public, but also the networks that would have to show it. They don't want this. They don't want to write any more checks just so you can have more teams on Tuesday and Wednesday, and they don't want to water down what happens on Thursday when they really make the money. And when I'm talking about money, they're paying $1.1 billion a year for this now. So I think their position should be heard, and it shouldn't be, well, we want to do it anyway.
Yeah, and it seems like, well, we want to do it anyway is what they're going to kind of push through here. And I agree with you. And I think fans see right through it. They know that these extra bids, as much as we want to talk about Division I expanding, they're not going to go to 25-win Central Connecticut State. They're going to go to 15-loss Indiana, right?
Correct. I mean, that's the way the process works. And I have done the brackets for Fox Sports for 6 years, 5 of which ended in a tournament. And so I know what's on the other side of that line. And in 2024, yes, Indiana State would have made it in a larger field. They would have made it. But the preponderance of teams that were on the other side of that line in almost every season were high major teams that just didn't win quite enough games or were maybe marginal candidates that the committee preferred someone else. Like when Notre Dame made it, I think it was 2022, Notre Dame made it over Texas A&M, a year in which neither one had a great season, but Notre Dame happened to lose to A&M, but A&M had just a horrendous February. They went 1 in however many games they played, and the committee judged that was just too far to come back from. But that's what you've been dealing with, that the flavor of ice cream, of mediocre ice cream that the committee prefers, as opposed to qualified tournament teams being left out. That doesn't happen.
We're talking with Mike DeCourcy, covers college hoops for Sporting News, Big Ten Network, and Fox Sports. Let's say, hypothetically, Mike, that this does come through, and it's I don't know, let's say it's 76 teams. How would you format this? I saw one that had the 10s, 11s, and 12s all playing each other on Tuesday and Wednesday, and it seemed to be kind of convoluted. And did you just expand the first four and keep the 64 team as it is starting on Thursday? Or, what's the best way to navigate this? I know this is a difficult question to ask as a hypothetical.
How's this for an answer? I don't care. I mean, I don't care how they wreck the tournament. I care whether they do it or not. And honestly, what the problem with this is not that Thursday at noon. There's no way CBS and Turner are allowing them to mess with Thursday at noon.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. There's no way. There's too much money involved. So whatever happens Tuesday and Wednesday is going to have to happen. So Thursday at noon, it'll still be 64 teams, and the ball will go up, and it'll still be very enjoyable. But the problem is what you've done to the race to get into the field. I don't think it'll be as compelling at all. Who's going to care if a 16 and 15 team from a major conference gets in as the 76th team? It's just not going to be the same. Right now, the teams that are fighting to get in are reasonably competent. This year, we had two teams get into the field with one quad one win. It's something that none of us who does this ever thought would happen, but it did. And it wasn't good for the tournament, but it happened. And so to expand that even farther, I think we'll get to a point where we have somebody in the field that doesn't have any quad one wins.
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't beat anybody, but we got to put 76 in. That's just not a good enough reason. And so the real damage will be done to the chase to get in, and that hurts the college basketball regular season, which a lot of people in the media, loud voices, have already said, it doesn't matter. Nobody cares about anything but March. Obviously, I'm not in that camp, but there are a lot of the louder voices that don't want to deal with it, that will tune in Thursday at noon. And then the other part of it that it damages is that casual participant in the office bracket and that sort of thing. Hey, you have to have your bracket done by Thursday at 5 or Tuesday at 5 o'clock now. Forget about Thursday at noon. Now it's Tuesday at 5 o'clock. How many people do you lose from that? And therefore, how many people do you lose from the audience once the actual tournament starts?
Yeah, and just the build-up, right, Mike? No offense to the first four, but I mean, I do kind of watch those in passing, but I love the build-up from Selection Sunday, and I'm having phone conversations with my friends like, hey, who do you like and who have you watched? And I'm talking about who I watched more, and we're giving each other tips and things like that all the way until Thursday, and then you kind of crush that window, I feel like. Selfishly, that's how I was looking at it.
Yeah, that's a big part of this. And the networks know this, and that's why they are not interested and why they have been very reluctant to go along with this. That's why it keeps chapping me when I keep hearing people say it's all about money. It's really not, because if the networks were in on this, if they were like, oh yeah, we want more games, yeah, start it on Monday if you want. I mean, they're not doing that. They know how the chemistry of this thing works. They can't explain it totally, but they get it after having paid all this money for it, how the chemistry works. And that's why they're not willing participants in this. They're going to be dragged into it, perhaps, but they're not willing participants because there's not a great demand for those games on Wednesday and Thursday. When an IU is in, they get an audience of 2 million and change. IU, Carolina, and just about no one else that's been in those games has drawn such an audience. Usually it settles in at about 1.5 million people for the at-large type games and less, significantly less for the 16 versus 16 games. The committee knows this. The NCAA knows this, and most of all the television people know this. So why are we expanding to get more games that not a lot of people will watch, and perhaps in the meantime create a late February and early March with more games that not a lot of people will watch? I want people involved in the sport, not thrown away.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Mike DeCourcy joins us to talk college hoops. Let's shift the conversation to kind of a season outlook. I know it's July, but at least we have an idea of what these rosters are going to look like for both IU and Purdue. And I wanted to start with Indiana. What's your opinion of Darren DeVries and what he's tried to build on the fly here to get his first team, just to really get a team on the floor in Bloomington, but also, another undertaking, another remake for a once illustrious program.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take a little bit of time. I like what he's got. They're going to shoot the basketball very well. I think they're going to establish and approach how they want to play, and I think that's really important. What didn't happen at Louisville over the course of the couple of years earlier in this decade prior to Pat Kelsey was that they didn't establish a standard. This is who we're going to be. This is how we're going to play. This is the minimum of effort that's going to be accepted, and this is the style of play that we're going to try to approach. They didn't do that, and that's why the program failed there. When Indiana had to kind of start over in 2008 under Tom Crean, even without much left over, they were able to do that. They weren't great, but they established a standard, and by 4 years later, they were in the Sweet 16. So that's what has to happen under Darren DeVries the first year. I don't think there's enough size there for them to be upper level of the Big Ten. The league's too good. But they can be maybe they can scrape out enough wins to get in the field. That's going to be up to them. But I think they can establish a standard of how they're going to play and the effort and commitment level that will be demanded of whoever wants to be a part of the program going forward.
Purdue in a different position as a national contender going into the year, and they have about as much talent as experience and as anybody in the country. But are there concerns for you, Mike, over being able to match the elite athleticism? Like I think about their game against Auburn from last year, and I understand this is going to be a different team than the team that they had, but just kind of getting run off the floor by that type of team. Is there some concern that as good as they are, and not that, Braden Smith isn't athletic or anything like that, but these big, long, super athlete teams like what you would face with an Auburn or a Florida or somebody like that could cause some issues?
No, I mean, I'm not worried about how they're constructed. I just wonder, for me, it's just a question of whether or not they have quite the level of individual talent to push you all the way to the very top to where you're holding the trophy up on Monday night. I mean, that's the only question that they have to resolve. Will the NBA see Braden Smith as that sort of player? Is Omar Meyer that sort of player? That's what they have to resolve. Do they have those guys now? I don't know the answer to that at this point, and I think we'll see over the course of the year whether it evolves in that direction. But they're going to be a phenomenal team. They struggled against Auburn at the level of development that they were in January, December, et cetera. They struggled defensively toward the end of the year, and I think that's the one question I think still has to be answered. Can they guard well enough as they're built to be successful? And I think that's where Daniel Jacobson maybe makes a difference. I watched him in the time he was allotted. I watched every game that the U19 team played in the World Cup, almost all beginning to end. I think I only missed part of. I missed a lot of the Jordan game because in the quarters because they beat them so badly. But I thought that Daniel played really well. I thought he was very impressive, and I'm not expecting him to be a full-time player. They brought in a transfer that'll also get a ton of minutes. But I think that ability to protect the rim that they didn't have a year ago will help in some of the defensive issues they had in 25.
Yeah, it was like once teams kind of figured out how to play them after January, then the dam kind of broke for them. I think Painter covered up a couple of things, but personnel-wise, without the rim protection, it ended up being tough for them. Last thing here, Mike, the Pacers drafted Cam Jones with a second-round pick, and I watched Cam Jones play a lot at Marquette. I know a lot of people did. I mean, he had a great career there. You seem like you're a Cam Jones guy. Are you a Cam Jones guy?
First of all, I really like him as a kid. I love how he approaches the game. I love how he attacks the game. He did not shoot the basketball well this past year. The position change from full-time wing with only minimal point guard responsibilities to a full-time point guard. He showed a lot of aptitude in the pick and roll. And teams late in the year gummed that up because he wasn't making shots at the same level, so he didn't finish great. But I think that can be resolved with time, with obviously more work than being a college athlete provides you. I mean, you're a full-time basketball player now, and I think that's why the Pacers invested in him at the level that they did, because I think they believe, too, that he's really good at the pick and roll, that he'll shoot it better. He has in the past. He shot 39 as a freshman, 41 as a junior. So his 31 last year was the aberration, and I think he'll get that touch back.
You can check out Mike's work at TSN Mike on X, BTN Studio stuff as always, and his brackets once the season comes as well, are a must-read every single week. Thanks so much, Mike. Great to catch up, and appreciate you coming on the show with me.
A pleasure, Derek. Thanks very much.
That's Mike DeCourcy, the best in the business when it comes to college hoops, in my opinion, and guy that, what I want from somebody that covers the sport, and it's fine to have cynicism. I'm a cynic in a way. I'm pessimistic a lot of times about sports, but the one thing, whether you agree or disagree with Mike on his takes, and I don't always agree with Mike's takes, it always comes from a genuine place, because at the end of the day, he loves college basketball, loves it, and he wants the sport to succeed, and he wants to support the sport to thrive, and he's defensive of the sport and all of that, and I've always appreciated that about him and his coverage. There aren't a lot of guys that are outspoken about that or get whipped up about things because they're they stay on the level. But I think what I like about Mike is that the reason why he gets outspoken and concerned about things is because he genuinely cares, and that's what you want as a fan. You want somebody that has the sport's best interests in mind, and Mike, whether you agree or disagree with him, I think that he always does. So we'll see what happens with the NCAA tournament expansion. I'll talk about why that's a bad idea. I know that I'm not alone here, and why some of the arguments for it don't really work. And we'll talk about also, if it does happen, which I think it will, what a 76-team tournament would actually look like. Because I was kind of going through and searching around. I'm like, so how would we do this? Like, who's going to go where? Who's going to play where? How's this going to be structured? And it's a lot. I'm not going to lie. But we'll talk about it when we come back. It's Query & Company. Derek Schultz filling in for Jake. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Really appreciate Eddie Garrison. The one constant in this show is Jake is out in Manchester to go see Oasis for doing a great job making sure our signal gets to you here in the fan studio. 93.5 and 107.5. Thanks for everybody watching the YouTube lounge as well. I was scrolling through and seeing some old friends in there like Gritty and Matthew and Maine, and got my buddy Garrison in there as well. Griff Pope, great dude. Caleb was asking about it, and maybe I should have done this. I was prepping the show. So one difference between Jake and I is that I'm a prep guy, and that's not to say that Jake doesn't do it. Jake does a great show, but like Jake likes to just kind of go. And for me, I'm like, I need notes, and I need things to look at in front of me, and it just, at the end of the day, and I hate kind of admitting this, Jake's a smarter guy than me, so Jake can just kind of store all of that stuff, and I kind of need reminders. So whenever we have a guest, and this is the way that I've always done it, I always put together like a bulleted list, and I'm like, I want to make sure that I hit this, like I don't script the interview like I'm just going to read off a sheet. Hi, Mike, how are you? Tell me about how you feel about NCAA. I'm not going to do that, but I want to have stuff in front of me so I know I don't miss anything. And I had considered adding something about the U.S. soccer, and they just wrapped up the Gold Cup, and they lose to Mexico. And I'm a real novice soccer guy, but I do try to watch the U.S. in any sort of international competitions, obviously the World Cup, but like also Gold Cup and stuff that matters. I went to a friendly against Costa Rica not that long ago in Columbus, and I'm telling you, and if you're listening to this and you're like, soccer sucks, I don't want to watch soccer. I saw a live friendly in Columbus, gorgeous stadium. What's it called? Low.co. It's got some weird name. It's a beautiful soccer facility. And it was an amazing night. It was in October, and it was among the best atmospheres that I've ever been for a live sporting event. It was so much fun. I went with Greg Rakestraw and a couple other buddies, John Cooler, who used to be with the Indy 11, and a couple other guys. Trey Higdon was part of that group too. And, great dudes, but just a really, really fun experience. And ever since then, I'm like, all right, I'm going to keep following. But, I'm not like, I can't speak on U.S. soccer with any sort of authority, so I just, at the end of the day, decided to junk the soccer question. So sorry about that, Caleb. Has more to do with me being an idiot when it comes to the sport than it does like blatantly trying to ignore the question. But one thing that we did talk about with Mike was NCAA tournament expansion. And we all know that this is not a positive idea. People don't want this. But as we've seen a lot of times in sports, what you want doesn't matter. And I hate to be blunt, and by what you want, I also mean what I want. They don't care. They're going to do whatever they think is best for them, whether it be from a money standpoint or from a, access standpoint. They're going to paint it however they want. And if they want to go to 72, they want to go to 76, they're going to do it. And I think it's at this point, it's a fait accompli that we're going to get expansion. So I was looking around and I'm thinking to myself, okay, how's this going to look? Like, what are we going to do? We're going to play Tuesday and Wednesday, and then we're going to keep everything 64 team on Thursday. And even if that's the case, what's that going to be? Like, we're just going to extend the first four, and it's going to be this whole big play-in tournament. So I went and looked, and Joe Lenardi, who everybody knows from ESPN, the bracketologist, had a potential 76-team format. And in it, he had the idea of taking the 10, 11, and 12 seed lines. So usually 4 teams, right? Well, I guess with first 4, you have some of the 12 seeds or 11 seeds potentially playing in that too. But 24 total teams. So you got, whatever you have, 52, I guess, in the field, and then 24 playing each other on Tuesday and Wednesday to get to a 64 team. So 12 of the 24 are going to end up surviving, right? So it's, 8 10 seeds, 8 11 seeds, 8 12. I wasn't a math major at IU, but I think that's right. I think that adds up to 24, right? And I'm looking at that and I'm like, I'm trying to see the positives from that. Like, would I watch an IU West Virginia game play each other for a right to be in the tournament, like an 11-seed game? I'm not going to lie, I'd watch that game. Whereas Alabama A&M against Central Connecticut State, I'm probably not watching that game. probably not watching that game. I had a buddy, my best friend went to CCSU. Shout out Central. But I'm probably not watching that game. So I can understand some of the arguments there. But then again, like, if it's the 15th team in the SEC, if it's South Carolina playing Iowa, and there's not a local tie, right? There's not an IU or Butler or Purdue. I'm kind of a basketball nut still, but I'm probably not watching that one. And it just, it's so watered down. And to Mike's point, like, this doesn't only affect March. Like, more basketball in March, yay, great, fine. You can get me on board with that. But what ruins it for me is that it lessens the games in January and February. And the people that are talking about access, as Mike mentioned, Matt Norlander of CBS had a really interesting article on this topic. I suggest that you look it up. That kind of pokes holes in some of the best arguments for expanding the field. And one of them is that because college basketball has added, 80 whatever teams since the last major expansion in 1985, you need to add more seats at the table. But he did a percentage breakdown here that I thought was really interesting. At the last major expansion 40 years ago, 23% of Division I teams, 64 of 282, made it in the tournament. 23%. At this point, it has been reduced, right? It has been reduced, but 68 of 364. 68 of 364 is 23%. Or, excuse me, 19%. So you're talking about 23% versus 19%. It's not like, are we really mad about the extra 4% of teams not getting a seat? Like Presbyterian doesn't have a seat. Bellarmine doesn't have a seat. Some of the real low, IU Indy, some of the real low mid-majors, they don't have a seat. I don't know if we're really worried about that. And again, those bids aren't going to go to teams from the Southland and from the MAC, right? The Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. They're going to go to the SEC. They're going to go to the Big 12. They're going to go to the ACC. That's where they're taking South Carolina. They're taking IU. They're taking West Virginia. They're not taking Bellarmine. They're not taking Valpo. They're not going to take those teams. So you're just adding more power conference outside of like real crazy scenario, like the Indiana State team, right? The Indiana State team with Josh Schertz from a couple of years ago, like that was a flash in the pan. I'm not trying to discredit what they did. That was an amazing season, but that was a flash in the pan type season for a mid-major type program. You're not going to get those type of teams come to the table with that sort of resume. And that was an Indiana State team that probably would have gotten in if this was last year, if they had waited another year. But only one of the 91 added Division I teams since 1985 has earned an at-large bid. One. So you've added 91 teams. We were talking about access. Give them more access. One of those teams has made the field. And it was like UCF or somebody like that. It wasn't even somebody that you would think of as a low or even a mid-major program. It was a decent level athletic program. I think they were in the American at that point. And that was the one at-large bid since 1985. So, look, if they expand the field, if it's 72 and it's 76, is it going to ruin the NCAA tournament? No. Am I still going to watch the NCAA tournament? Yes. We will adjust. We adjust to all things. I've adjusted to not having a Pac-12, or at least not a real Pac-12. I've adjusted to Oregon and Purdue being a conference game. I've adjusted to Syracuse and Georgetown not being a thing anymore. I've adjusted all those. We all have, right? I haven't liked it. It's been annoying, but I've adjusted to it, and we'll adjust to this eventually. And it sucks, and I'm not saying that it's what I want. It's not what anybody wants, but they serve you the plate and you eat the meal. That's kind of how it works. It's like that scene from Anchorman. You're going to eat this cat poo. We're going to eat the cat poo, okay? 72, 76 teams, we're going to eat it, and that's fine. And honestly speaking, the NCAA tournament is still the NCAA tournament. It can't be cat poo. I'm just bummed because this is the first time really ever. I can't think of something else in sports where it's been this unpopular and it's still going to be forced through. Like the college football playoff expansion, there was a lot of debate about that. And there are a lot of people that did not want a college football playoff. But even that had a lot of people that did want it. including me. I didn't want 12 teams. I wanted to go to like 6 or 8 first, and then like we expand it from there. But there were plenty of people like that. That was much more of a, and I'm spitballing a little bit here, but that was much more of like a 60-40, 70-30 type thing than it was a 95-5 thing, a 90-10 thing, which is what the NCAA tournament is, where you conduct any poll that you want about this, and fans are hugely in favor of keeping it the way that it is. And I get that change is hard, and sometimes people don't want, people buck against any sort of evolution or any sort of change. I don't see what the big selling point is for expanding the NCAA tournament. I don't care about the team that went 17-14 and 8-10 in their power league and was 1-9 in quad 1 games. I don't care about them being sent home. I don't care. Even West Virginia, who deserved to be in the tournament this year, I don't care. I thought about it for like an hour, and I was mad about it for like an hour, and then I was filling out my bracket. I was on with my day. And maybe at the end of the day, that's the problem with this tournament here, is that they know, the powers that be know, that once they expand this to 72, 76 teams or whatever, then you're going to be mad about it for an hour or 2 hours or a day or two or a week or two or whatever, and then we're all going to be on board, because by Thursday at noon, it's going to be the tournament that we know and love. So who cares about Tuesday and Wednesday? Thursday at noon, 64 teams. The ball is tipped. Let's go. Here we go. Gambling, slamming beers, calling off work, doing whatever else. You're ready for another NCAA tournament, and that's what's going to happen, unfortunately. 239-1070. At Schultz975 as well on X and Twitter if you want to engage with us on the show. And thanks. A lot of times it's nice to be in this chair and come in and fill in every once in a while and have people be like, oh, hey, like, Derek Schultz, he's there. Cool. He doesn't totally suck. I'm glad. I'm glad to see that. I'm glad that there are some people that are probably like, oh, God, this guy again? I thought he got fired 5 years ago, which is true. But I appreciate the kind words and the support. And it's nice to hop on here and it's like riding a bike. Come back here and hang out with Eddie for a little bit and have a good sports show. Something else that I wanted to talk about, and we'll do this coming up in the next segment as we lead into Tony East. The Pacers and, kind of closing the book on the Myles Turner situation. But also I want to get into the gap year and what that is and how I feel about it, because the Pacers are kind of forced that way with the Tyrese Halliburton injury. But I do think that there's something that I wanted to get in front of when it comes to the 25-26 Pacers that I think it's important to dig my heels in about. Something that I'm seeing with the fan base that I don't agree with and I don't like. And it's going to go against how I have felt in the past. But we'll talk about that when we come back. It's Query & Company, 93.5, 107.5, The Fan. Don't go anywhere. Couple of big hero shout-outs. And they are real-life heroes for what they do to protect our community. Our friends at IFD, Indianapolis Fire Department, just brought up Sundays because down on the circle right now, our other friends, American Dairy Association Indiana, shout out to Jenny and Brooke and Al. They have an amazing team over there. And I know Jake feels the same way. Jake and I have done a lot of work with them over the years. They're doing an ice cream social right now down the circle, obviously downtown and below us where we are right now on the fourth floor of the flagship here, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. And they hand-delivered us ice cream sundaes. So Eddie got, what you had, strawberry?
I did, strawberry and sprinkles.
Is that right? Yeah, I had chocolate and Jimmy's, Rainbow Jimmy's, and really, really excellent. And there's just something, I don't know why the American Dairy Association Indiana ice cream is just better than other ice cream, but
no, Jimmy's are sprinkles, right?
Mentioned. Well, yeah, Jimmy's are sprinkles. It's sprinkles is more of a regional term. I know in Indiana they say sprinkles, but Jimmy's is the more accepted term of what they are. I think it's more widespread to call them Rainbow Jimmy's. But
kind of
sometimes
like Sega Baba,
Sega Baba, second game of back to. Thank you for mentioning that, Eddie, as well. Yeah, sometimes I go into like Graders or some of the ice cream stores around here, and I'm like, yeah, can I have Rainbow Jimmy's? And they look at me like I have three heads. And I go back home to Connecticut or something like that. And I'm like, yo, let me get some Jimmy's on that bad boy. And they're like, I got you. They know. They know right away that that's what they're called, and that's what they are. But
I heard somebody call it Midtown the other day. I was out and about. I was just like, wait, whoa.
Well, that's what it is, man. Midtown.
I was like, I know Derek Schultz calls it Midtown, but I don't hear any other
everybody
people.
calls it Midtown. That's what it is. Midtown. It's the area between downtown and the north side. It's Midtown. That's what I can't stand. And we'll get to the Pacers here in just a second, but like the news broadcast sometimes they're like, and there was a traffic accident on the north side, and it's like 16th and Meridian. I'm like, north side of what? I guess it's north of downtown, I guess, but like north side, what? Like north side to me is like Castleton. Like that's the north side. 16th Street, that's not north side. So I love the Midtown explainer because it kind of covers, not that 16th is Midtown either, but it kind of covers that whole middle area. So like Butler, Tarkenton, Meridian, Kessler, Broad Ripple, South Broad Ripple, Wharfley, Meridian Hills, like that whole area, Midtown. Because that's where I'm at. That's where I've lived for the last 10 years. And it's an awesome area of town because literally it's like 15 minutes to get anywhere. So, hey, we're meeting up on the south side. Cool. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Hey, we're going to go over to the track or whatever. Cool. I'll be there in 15 minutes. North side, south side, east side, whatever else. Even though the problem with Indianapolis now, Eddie, is that it's growing to the point where I have friends in like Sheridan, and I'm like, do I need to take a helicopter to get, you know what I mean? Like, the tentacles of Indy have grown so much now that like these places, like when I first moved here 20 years ago, these places that were like cow towns, like Sheridan or something like that, or McCordsville, are huge, like thriving communities, and everybody wants to be there now. It's just a lot different, which is good. I mean, it's good to have that type of growth, and it's great that people want to be in and around Central Indiana. It's a great place to live. We love being here. Nobody's holding us. My wife and I, she's from Vermont and I'm from Connecticut, and we're raising our son in Indianapolis. There's a reason for that. We really like, we like the people, and we like the vibe and the whole deal. The vibe around the Pacers, not great. I think we would say, not their own fault, right? Depending on how you feel, I guess, about the Myles Turner situation, but this idea of a gap year. So Tyrese Halliburton's not going to play for 25-26. We know that. We knew that before Kevin Pritchard confirmed it during Monday's press conference, his postseason availability, that Tyrese Halliburton wasn't going to play. And when he comes back, he might not be the same player, and he might not ever be the same player again. And I don't really want to think about that right now, to be totally honest with you, but that's a bridge that we're going to have to cross when we get there. And there is an element of not just the Pacers fan base, but just NBA fans or just sports fans in general, that once your team is out of championship contention, once there is not a realistic path to winning a championship, fans think to themselves, okay, nothing else matters. None of this matters. So let's just lose every game, get the best draft pick possible, and just crumple up this year and start thinking about the future. And I'll be honest, in some cases, that stance makes sense. And I'll give you a recent example. The 2022 Colts, that team was going nowhere. They were going nowhere. And Jim Irsay, God rest his soul, made one of the wackiest decisions in the history of wacky decisions in the NFL. And you bring, I love Jeff Saturday personally, but you bring in a guy with no major experience at all to coach the team. And it was just, it was a bad decision. And of course it aged terribly. And not that everything that happened was Jeff's fault, but everything around that team, when as it was happening in the middle of the season, I thought the best thing for the Colts right now is to lose. I remember the game against the Eagles, and that was actually a hotly contested game, and I think Jalen Hurts ended up, running into the end zone on a draw play on like a critical third down, and it kind of clinched the game, and I was actually happy about it. I was happy they lost that game. There was another close game in there. I was trying to think of who they were playing. Maybe it was that Monday night game against the Steelers where they messed up the timeout somehow. I don't know.
Chargers?
No, the Chargers game was one-sided. That was a primetime game too, but they played a primetime game against the Steelers at home. And I have to go back and look it up. I've mentally repressed a lot of the 2022 season in my defense. But there was another game that they lost, and I was happy that they lost. And they won that first game against the Raiders, and they lost all the other games, and it ended up being a good thing. The Texans game, right? There was that 4th and 20, and the Texans throw that long pass and ended up getting it, and that was the best thing to happen to the Colts.
You were right about the Pittsburgh game, by the way.
Okay.
And, of course, there was that Minnesota game the same year.
And then they blew the big lead in Minnesota. Yep. All those things ended up being beneficial. There's nothing to be gained next year from the Pacers and tanking because the whole conversation is a non-starter. If we're to assume that Pascal Siakam and Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith and those guys are healthy, this team can only be so bad. This team's still going to win 40 games. Just watch. They will. I'll stake anything on it that it's going to be like a 40-win team. And I just think it's a disservice to them to have worked and put in as much as they did in this championship run. They were 48 minutes away from an NBA championship. And Siakam is doing an extension, and Nesmith is in a contract year and the whole deal. And to go to them and be like, hey, guys, guess what? So we got a gap year here, okay? So we're gonna play Jarrett's like 35 minutes. We're gonna have Furphy throw alley-oops to James Wiseman, and we're just gonna tank the season. Like the Pacers would never do that, and no one's ever gonna do that. That's not the proper way to conduct a basketball team and to conduct an operation. The Pacers going 40 and 42 at the end of the day, does that do anything for them next year? I'm not going to sit here and say that, yeah, it does. Probably not. But neither does going, 35 and whatever the math is to get to, 35 and 47 to get to 82. That doesn't do anything for them either. And I know they got their pick back and the whole deal. It doesn't. I think they should try to win games. I understand this is a development play, and you're not going to go all in because you don't have Halliburton. I totally get it, and I think that is the defensible way to approach it. But there's a difference between doing that and tanking. We've seen NBA teams tank more than any other league. We've seen tanking. And asking the Pacers to do that, I think, is it's just insane to me. Let's just throw Wiseman and Jackson out there. They're both coming off blown Achilles. We're fine at center. Come on, guys. Come on. You're not going to do that. And you're not going to ask Siakam and Nesmith and all those guys to do something like that. So let's just take tanking off the table. I don't want to have a conversation about it. I don't want to deal with it. Let's just get in front of it now. I don't even want to look at tweets about it when the season starts. Oh, what are the Pacers doing? God, they're winning this game. What are they doing? I don't want to do that. I'm still going to pull for them to win, and maybe they can get in a plucky first-round series against, I don't know, Orlando. Fine. Sign me up. Cool. I'll watch that. I'll get into that. But this idea that just because they can't win the championship, that doesn't mean that, you throw everything out the window. I think Tony East agrees with that. We'll ask him about it. Myles Turner, the Fever, Summer League. There's a lot happening with Tony, and he joins us top of the hour. It's Query and Company. Derek Schultz filling in 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. So Eddie's the producer. He's mixing in some more of his tastes, and this is fine. What's hard for me, Eddie, is that, it's a scientific fact that hip-hop reached perfection in 1994. So that's kind of the era of, hip-hop that I really enjoy, and particularly East Coast hip-hop, New York hip-hop, and Nas and Gangstar and stuff like that, even though I'm fine with, like, Outkast and, Southern hip-hop really kind of came on the mark there. Every single photo of me in the mid-'90s, summer of '96, was like this. You're too young to remember this. So it was an East Coast, West Coast beef thing, like the Biggie Pac stuff, and obviously it ended tragically with the death of both of those. But every single photo of me in the summer of '96 is me doing the East Coast sign. I was 13. And so, like, we're at Diamond Lake up in Michigan. If you guys are familiar with Casapos, Michigan, so, like, right over the state border. I have family there. And I'm, like, on an inner tube, and I'm doing the East Coast sign and all of that. So, man, I thought I was pretty cool back then. So, yeah, we're mixing some more hip-hop rejoiners here. Anything's better than the stuff that Jake plays. I mean, Jake would just be playing, like, I don't know, Champagne Supernova or whatever he's going to end up playing. I'm not sure about Tony East's musical tastes, but I know his basketball analysis is top-notch, and that's why we always like to have him on this show. And I say we, like I'm part of the show. I fill in like once a year on Querying Company. But he joins us now all the way from Vegas. He's the host of Locked On Pacers. He covers the team for SI and Forbes. I guess this is Jake's show, Tony, so I could lead off with an off-the-wall question. Do you have a hip-hop fan, or do you have like a favorite artist?
I'm not going to lie, I thought you were about to use the segue that you were throwing up the East Side stuff for me all these years later. I thought that was going to be the joke.
Yes, for Tony East. That's what I was doing at 13.
You do. I don't know that I have a favorite, like, era or time. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, like, you're either into it or you're not. Country music is like that for me, where it's just it's not for me. I don't like it. I didn't grow up with it. None of my friends listened to it. It wasn't relevant to my life, like, a pickup truck and having some beers with some girl like that. None of that stuff happened for me in suburban Connecticut, so it didn't resonate with me.
I don't care for country music myself, but I at least like understand why other people like it. Like, electronic music is the opposite, where I'm like, I don't like this, and I don't get why other people are into it.
Yeah, like when I'm watching the race at the 500 and I peer over into the snake pit, I'm like, man, I really want to understand that, but maybe I don't want to understand that. Let's talk about understanding the Myles Turner situation. I want to give you credit here. I mean, I want to give you credit always, 365 days a year, because I think you do a great job. But I know in the wake of the Turner shock, and I'm a Locked On Pacers listener, so I'm a Tony East content consumer. You had mentioned two things that I don't think a lot of other folks were talking about or maybe even considering, unless it was in the back of their minds. You mentioned the fact that maybe Milwaukee gave him a take it right now or leave it deal. And the second thing that you said is that maybe Myles wanted to leave. And we still don't know for sure, and maybe we'll never know for sure how it all played out. And Myles hasn't had his presser with Milwaukee, right? But I think it's fair to say that at least one of those, if not both, one of those things absolutely happened, no? With just what Rick Carlisle has said and just kind of simmering on this for another week or so?
Yeah, the take it or leave it part seems fairly true to me. And like that, I did guess that mostly just because of how dramatic the things the Bucks had to do were to do this, right? Like waive and stretching Dame alone, if it gets out that you're considering that and you don't do it, is like embarrassing, especially if it gets out that you were doing it and didn't get the guy. They also had to trade. Look, he's not good anymore, but people in Indy know him from Notre Dame. Like Pat Connaughton played 9 years there, won a championship, like kind of legendary to the franchise, and all this other little stuff they had to do. If you have to do all that to get a guy, you tell them, like, look, we'll do it, but you got to tell us right now if you're joining our team or not, right? So that's part of it. And the other part is just money moves so fast in free agency. Like there's that story Enos Cantor's told in the past where, the Blazers said, yep, we're offering you 5 for $90, but you have to take it in 5 minutes. If you don't take it in 5 minutes, we're pulling it, right? Like free agency just happens so fast that you have to sometimes accept these things quickly. And if Myles got the number he liked, I think it's possible, and if not likely, given all the stories of events, that is a possible part of it. I do wonder the other part being if maybe he wanted to be back and the start of free agency went not the way he hoped with the Pacers, and that made him more willing to not go back to them anyway with that, like if that's a part of it as well, because all indications were that he wanted to return. Rick Carlisle said on this program or the morning show that it was the number one priority. You know, I can't imagine that he started free agency wanting to depart given what was actually out there for him. So I think both of those things ended up being true. Looking forward to hearing Myles' recount of events because, I mean, it doesn't make the Pacers look necessarily, air quotes, better, but it makes it more understandable how it got to this point when it seemed like it made so much sense for him to return and the Bucks just did something so dramatic. Like he's almost 30. He's got to do what's best for him at some point.
What do you think Myles Turner's legacy will end up being here? And I understand this is a difficult question to answer in the immediate wake of it, but will it take a second for fans, kind of like it did with Jermaine O'Neal? Or, you know, I don't think it'll be a forever thing just because he left under these circumstances like it was with Paul George. I think that was a much messier divorce. But then again, you know, I'm talking about two players that Myles Turner, no offense to Myles Turner, he was a nice player here, but he wasn't close to the caliber of player that either J.O. or Paul George was.
Yeah, I find longevity legacy used to be the hardest to kind of like define, you know, because Turner, you know, he was on two teams that will go down as top 10-ish in franchise history, one that's going to go down as maybe top 1, right?
Yeah.
He was a starter for that team. That alone gets you somewhere. 10 years gets you somewhere, and he doesn't have like some obscure like best true shooting percentage season stat. Like blocks leader is like a traditional box score thing that everybody recognizes. He has warts certainly, but like that is not a longevity case. That is like great player on great teams case. That puts him certainly in a place where, you know, it might stink for fans the first time he comes back because he did just straight up leave, but I think people will come to appreciate him and what he did for a team. And, you know, I've told you this on other platforms, like I always think players become more beloved when they grow up in a city, and he was with the Pacers from getting drafted at age 19 until age 29. You know, it's like they got to know him, right? He was like a part of their lives. That it wasn't just like an athlete they watched. It was like a person they knew. So in some ways, I think his legacy will remain. His name will come up for years and years. It's like every time there's a center who blocks shots, like maybe he's the next Myles Turner for the Pacers, right? He certainly was the transitionary piece. It's like, to me, he's the face of the Pacers becoming modern. You know, they went from Roy Hibbert and like Al Jefferson's on the team and all this stuff to like a stretch big that Larry Bird is, you know, saying should play the 4 and take long twos. And then it's like, no, he should take threes. You know, all that stuff is going to give him, I think, a favorable legacy when it's all said and done, even though I think probably this coming year it'll be a little weird, both because he's on a division rival and because he just left, right? With a clear, obvious reason for him to stay. He left.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They did kind of go from being behind the curve, like the 1995 style of basketball, even though it worked out pretty well for them when Hibbert was playing well, to being way ahead of it, right? With the Halliburton acquisition and just the style that they decided to play. I hadn't really thought about it that way. This center rotation now, we know that, you know, the combination of Huff and Jackson and Wiseman, and you can throw Bradley in there, it's not going to make up 100% for what Turner was, but what is success to you when it comes to that center rotation? You know, I guess I should ask Tony, can it work? Are you confident that there's enough there to make this not like a huge liability all season long?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't lie. Like, I like what J. Huff can be. You know, you've watched him because of Zach Edey. Like, he's fine. You know, he does some good stuff. He has a lot of the same issues Turner has in terms of his core strengths as a player, ironically. But he's a rotation level player. Isaiah Jackson, I think, is good. I think they would like to keep him. He's a rotation level guy. Are either of them starter level talents? Like, how are they? You know, people want to talk about how they'll fit, what they'll do for the Pacers. Like, maybe they'll be good, right? The Pacers have been a very good development program the last couple of years. Every center they're going to have on their team next year is going to be 26 or younger, right? I get it. They haven't really gone against starters that much, like at all, right? What's that going to look like? How are they going to fit? So on one hand, I get if you're playing truly rotation caliber centers 48 minutes a night, it might go fine. We'll see if Wiseman is actually that level of player. They have such a small sample with him. Who knows if Bradley sticks around or not? I get the platoon style. Two of them are coming off of major injuries. In one of their cases, their second major injury of their career, right? Who knows how good these guys are going to be? Like, it's possible they're not as good as last year, and then your healthiest, most reliable big is J. Huff, right? Like, it's totally possible that this is oh man, we really need a center thing. And this is the year to have that be the reality, right? It's not a huge deal if your center rotation isn't as good as it needs to be this year if you're the Pacers. But yeah, it's not going to make up even close to what they had last year at the position. I will say in their case, they'll be happy that they all are kind of stylistically very different. You can kind of figure out what does and doesn't work going forward, what you think you might need. It'll be hard because Halliburton will be playing with those guys. So it'll just be interesting, right? Can they turn Wiseman into something? What does J-Hub look like in a bigger role, more consistent role? What does Jackson look like coming off an Achilles? Like, you could make questions about all these guys, and I think they hope it adds up to good enough. It might. It's just impossible to know because it's so many unproven dudes who have like maybe one season of successful rotation level play or are coming off a big injury.
We're talking with Tony East, host of Locked On Pacers, covers the team for a myriad of other different places, including Forbes, and he joins us right now on Query and Company on the guest line. Are you expecting them to add a guard, or are they going to do anything else, or is this the roster?
I've made the case that they should add another veteran point guard. I do wonder after Cam Jones and Quentin Jackson were signed on the same day if they would opt out of doing that. I mean, you get 50 games of these guys on two ways in theory. Like, is that enough Quentin Jackson to cover for any potential injury to McConnell or Nembhard? Maybe it is if they think he's good enough to do it. Do they trust Cam Jones right away? Maybe. I mean, that hasn't really been their history of, using their early second-round picks. I think you need, that table-setting kind of guy, both if you're trying to be good or if you're trying to kind of develop. You just need guys who can get everybody organized and get them good shots. So I've kind of made the case that they should maybe look at point guards if they need someone else, just another initiator. But if you're rolling into a season with two of your four centers coming off of major injuries, you don't know how good they're going to be. You kind of need a lot of other depth there, right? You might need Huff and Bradley just in case. What Wiseman and Jackson can't play back-to-backs or can't do this or that, or they don't look as good as they used to. You might need four centers, right? Maybe they add another center on a two-way to cover for that. But, there's kind of a lot in the air between those two positions on what their 15th player should be. And so I still think they need another point guard. Maybe they view Jackson and Cam Jones as enough, but I think Tony Bradley's kind of the swing guy. His contract's non-guaranteed. He'd probably be outside the rotation anyway. Do they want to keep him? Would they rather have a point guard? I think they'd rather have a one if I were in charge, but I would understand, given the health that they have at the depth of the five, going with four centers, but those are the only two positions that I can them deciding on their 15th guy being between.
You're in Vegas now. What are you most looking forward to when it comes to the Summer Sirs, and can we call them the Summer Sirs? Is that okay with everybody?
Do you think Sirs should come back next year?
You know what? I was really on the fence about that, and then I just kind of leaned all the way in. And in their defense, they bring out the Sirs campaign, and they have maybe the greatest NBA season in Sirs history. So there you go.
I had a great Sirs pun tweet loaded up for if they won Game 7. That'll never see the light of day. I think Johnny Furphy is the guy that I'm personally, and I think the team will be the most interested in. In general, those second-year guys, you want to see a lot of, kind of what happened with Jarris last year. I think Jarris Walker had a little bit of an overrated summer league last year, but he did a lot of the stuff they asked him to do in that he ran around like crazy. He got rebounds. He played physically. He turned it over too much. His defense wasn't great, but he showed new skills or signs of improvement that they really hope to see from him. You never know with these rookies, right? Cam Jones and Taylor Peter could do terrible. It's the first summer league. It's not a huge deal. You'd obviously prefer to see them be good, but any returning player, then adding something new or just looking better than everybody else because they're an NBA player with NBA experience, that's really important. And Furphy is, Rick Carlisle said last year that you him as potentially a future rotation piece. Pritchard said he added 20 pounds, and they're hopeful that he could be something for them this year. Who knows what that means on a night-to-night basis. But he clearly has a nose for the ball. He's a good rebounder. He's a physical defender. Can he make shots? Can he handle the ball at all? Is he actually going to be somebody they're willing to play this year? He's only 20. He's the guy I have by far the most intrigue in because the theory of what he does is important. But making shots is a big part of what you need at that position, and he hasn't really done that at any pro level yet. And he's going to have a huge responsibility out there. Obviously, Quentin Jackson, Enrique Freeman, Ray J. Dennis, the returning two-way guys, how they play could be telling with so much up in the air at their positions as well. But I think Johnny Furphy by far should be the player that every fan has their eye on out there because if he plays well, that's a good sign for what he could maybe do this year and a good sign for his long-term outlook.
And maybe you don't want to admit this publicly, but do you like the Vegas trip in the middle of July? Are you like, yeah, this is kind of cool. I like watching Summer League basketball, or is it kind of like, oh, God, July in Vegas and I'm tired and the whole deal?
So I love Summer League usually. It's very fun. I get to see a lot of my media pals. I love games with no, it doesn't matter who wins. That's not important, It's just like fun hoops. I love that stuff. I really enjoy the Vegas experience. Deep sigh. After their long finals run, I wasn't like psyched about immediately traveling 2 weeks later. But I hate to, like, our job is awesome, right? Like any sports media job is cool. I hate to be that guy who's like, oh, woe is me. I have to go to a big fun city and watch games. Like it drove me crazy at the finals. All these media people that I like love, and they were very nice and great. They were like, oh, I can't wait for it to be over. And like I got what they were saying. I said that to some people too, but like it's like we're at the finals. This is cool. So I have trouble balancing that in my head of like, yeah, this is gonna be awesome. Love Summer League, love Vegas, and like, man, can we just stop with the games and the travel for a sec, everybody?
Yeah, I hear you. It was a long, as fun as it was. The Pacers. I mean, God, that was 2.5 extra months of basketball. I mean, it was a lot for you, and I know you're churning out content and all that.
Game 7 was like 15 days, 17 days ago.
Yeah.
Like it just happened.
Yeah, it's wild to think, really. Before we let you go, I got to fit in a Fever question. 9 and 10, you thought maybe, okay, Commissioner's Cup and what they did to Vegas, and you're like, yeah, sweet, like maybe there's something here, and then they sleepwalk through the Sparks game, and yesterday was just brutal against Golden State. You know, with where they're at right now, Tony, is there something missing, or like what is the solution, I guess, from what you've seen for the Fever here moving forward to kick things into gear?
It's really inconsistent, right? And I used to have this thought that inconsistent just kind of was a synonym for bad when it came to pro sports teams. The Pacers the last 3 years have kind of gotten me off of that. And I think the Fever kind of fall into this 2 years ago Pacers category where they could beat anybody any night. You know, New York, no problem. Minnesota, got them. Seattle, got it. Atlanta beat them. And they've lost to middling to cellar dweller teams many times too. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Their offense has kind of come and gone, right? Their shooting is there. Some nights it's not others. Their speed and tempo that I think they hoped to have this year, given their additions, comes and goes like very early in that Valkyries game. They were moving. They looked fast. They were up. And then once Golden State kind of got their physicality and then slowed it down, they looked bad, right? And defensively, it's been kind of all over the place where some nights you're like, whoa, look at that. And other nights it's like, oh my gosh, could they guard me and you right now? And so there's a lot of reasons you could have for this whole new team, right? Really flipped roster. Mid-season, Clark's missed time, Bonner's missed time, Dantas missed time, Cunningham missed time, Stephanie White missed 2 games. Like a lot of their season has been in that way, really start and stop. Like Ari McDonald in and out with her contract situation. So in some ways, I understand how that group in that situation could be inconsistent, right? Like it's hard for them to have any practice time and rhythm. The game they just played, I think, was their first game as a fully healthy team, like the whole season, and they lost. But if they have time to actually practice with this group, and they have 2 more home games, I believe, on this homestand. Like if they can clean those up, I think they'll feel better. So they've just been so inconsistent that it's hard for me to get a feel for what they can be. Because at their best, I mean, they've literally beaten everybody, but they've also lost to a 3-win Connecticut team and can't beat Golden State. Both of the Sparks' only wins in like 3 weeks are against the Fever. It's just really strange, and I think Caitlin being back will help them get some of that consistency back. But they have a lot to work through as they get healthier in terms of being the same team every night.
Check out Tony's coverage, Blue Sky and X, and you can listen to him, Locked On Pacers, his written coverage, Forbes, and everywhere else. He does an amazing job. All of the best gap year coverage for the Pacers from our friend Tony East. Thanks so much, my man. Always appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's Tony East. You can hear the at the end of the gap year thing. Yeah, we're going to have to deal with the gap year stuff for the entire way here. We come back on the show. More on the Pacers. Rick Carlisle reacting to the Myles Turner news and laying out a plausible scenario, what it means here moving forward. And we'll talk gap year and what that could mean for the Pacers, too. Just a lot of Pacers content when we come back. It's Query and Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Welcome back. Thanks again to Tony East for joining us. Thank you for joining us here this afternoon, because this isn't a Jake show. And I always appreciate it when people tune in and they hear somebody else and they don't immediately tune out. Like you give me a chance to do the show. And looks like most of you did. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that hopped in their car and they didn't hear Jake and they were like, "Oh, this guy, isn't he loosely associated with Jake? I don't want this guy." My name's Derek Schultz, by the way. That's this guy in this conversation. And I appreciate Eddie Garrison as well, and all the folks here, Todd Meyer and everybody else, for allowing me to come in here and do this every once in a while and hang out with you. And I love sports radio. I love Indianapolis sports. This was a passion and this was my life for a long time. And while I have transitioned into something else, as far as my full-time career is concerned, it's still something every once in a while I kind of miss. I don't know if I'd want to do it every day anymore, but I do like being able to hop on here once in a while and play pretend like I'm still relevant and all of that. So appreciate you guys allowing me to do so. The Pacers trying to stay relevant in the NBA race. And look, we all know that this is not a team that is going to contend for a championship, not only without Halliburton, but without Myles Turner. I mean, it's a team that at the end of the day, you subtract Turner and you subtract Halliburton and you add Jay Huff. You re-add James Wiseman. You add Cam Jones, Talon Peter. That's those four aren't going to make up for the two that you say what you want about Myles Turner, but that's not going to make up for what you have there. So I think we can all enter next season on with some realism when it comes to what the Pacers are and what they can be in the scope of 25-26, and then you just hope they can get back on that championship track once Halliburton comes back and you can kind of recalibrate and reopen that window, hopefully. But that's all cross that bridge when we get there type things. We're still kind of looking back in the past, and I let off the show with this, and I understand that at this point, the Turner thing happened 8 days ago. So Myles Turner, the announcement with the report of him going to Milwaukee, that was 8 days ago. And in a 24/7 news cycle, 8 days might as well be 80 days ago. And I fully understand that people are tired of hearing about Myles Turner, right? But I think today was a good day to kind of close the book on it, because you had the Rick Carlisle comments from yesterday on a different show about what he thinks may have happened with that. And just sort of now that we've had a week to sort of simmer on it and hear whispers about what could have happened or what hypothetically happened, I think we're better able to sort of create a little bit of a timeline of likely facts of how this whole situation went down. But Eddie, I'm putting you on the spot here. Do we still have the Carlisle audio saved? Okay. This is Rick Carlisle on the Green Light podcast talking about what he thinks may have happened with Myles Turner and the decision to go to the Bucks.
Losing Myles Turner is a significant loss for our team. I mean, the guy's been a terrific player. He had a great season. And look, we were talking to them, meaning his agent, about him returning. And, really kind of out of nowhere, Milwaukee decided to waive Damian Lillard and stretch his money out over whatever number of years you can do it by rule. And then they created space to sign Myles. And so I think what probably happened, and this is part of negotiation in any sport, a team will say, hey, look, we have this offer. It's this much over this many years. But if we make this offer, we need to know that you're going to take it and not shop it. I believe that that's what probably happened with Milwaukee. They just jumped at it, and there's never a chance to counter. Those things happen. And when they do, you just got to keep going.
Yeah, and as I said, Rick Carlisle's a smart guy. Rick Carlisle's been around the NBA for basically his whole life. I mean, if you go back to his playing days, we're talking 40, 50 years. I also don't think that Rick Carlisle offers that explanation and that hypothetical without getting it from somebody that, or either getting it from somebody that's how it went down, or just knowing from how the system works that is like 90% likely that that's how things went down. I don't think he offers that without feeling confident that that's how it happened. And so I think some people's reaction would be, well, of course Carlisle's going to say that because it lets the organization off the hook, right? Because if they didn't get the chance to counter, then the Pacers are blameless. They could just throw their hands up and say, well, we didn't get the chance to counter, so you have no idea what we were going to be willing to pay Myles Turner. So I can understand that. But this idea that, Myles Turner always wanted to be a Pacer and they were playing hardball with him and then he took a better offer. I don't know if hardball is the right word for the Pacers, but I think the Pacers were dealing from a position of what they thought was strength and what we all thought was strength. They knew that there wasn't much out there for Turner options-wise. We had talked about Detroit and Brooklyn and a couple of these teams, but they started making moves and their cap space started drying up. There weren't a lot of teams that could take on Myles Turner. And the Bucks weren't one of them because they hadn't waived and stretched Dame, and you weren't expecting that to happen to get rid of Lillard like that. But they ended up doing that, and they ended up coming and swooping in and taking him because the Pacers, I think, looked at the situation. They thought they had the power play, and they said, okay, we've got this number in mind, and whatever that number was. Let's say that it was $23 million per season. Okay, Myles, here's the number. And maybe Turner looked at that and said to himself, I think I'm worth closer to 30. And maybe he added up the last 10 years because it had been an interesting relationship with the Pacers, right? I don't know if as much as he lasted here 10 years and had good years here and had good times here, and I think Myles appreciated the fans and even appreciated the organization, I don't know if he always felt like he was fully embraced here. And I think that's a defensible position. This was the guy that was constantly part of trade rumors and to the point where the Pacers actively shopped for his replacement not that long ago by signing an offer sheet with DeAndre Ayton. So we have proof that happened. That's not just a rumor. That happened. They shopped for his replacement. That's what they were doing. And I do wonder if how it played out was the Pacers, from a position of strength, it's a business decision, came to him with a number that he looked at and thought, you know what, guys, I'm out of here. I'm gone. Called his agent right then and said, hey, the next really good offer that we get, let's just take. And here comes Milwaukee with a much better offer, $27 million. Well, I say much better offer. We don't know for sure what the Pacers offered, right? But we know it wasn't $27 million and probably, the player option and all of that. It's a very good deal for Myles. Took that and didn't even allow the Pacers to counter. Because if you allow the Pacers to counter, that almost makes you, let's say that it wasn't a take or leave it deal, right? We're dealing with all hypotheticals here, so just follow along. I know that I'm, we're all guesstimating here what happened. Let's say it wasn't a take or leave it deal, and he could have allowed the Pacers to counter that offer. That would make him look worse to Pacers fans, right? Because if he allowed them to counter and the Pacers matched the offer and then he still left for Milwaukee, that makes the fan base here feel worse about it. Not that Myles should necessarily care. It's a business decision. He's got to do what's best for him, but I think that's part of it too. But if you're asking me, what do you think played out in this situation? I think the Pacers came to him with an offer. They thought that it was a buyer's market for them. It was a low number to Myles. It was, I don't want to say the last straw, but it was enough for him to be like, you still don't want me? Okay, fine. In his head, I'm talking about. I'm going to go somewhere else. And then Milwaukee swooped in and kind of gave him that parachute. I just don't think that it's out of the question that Turner wanted to go elsewhere. And after 10 years, and that's not even to say that there's an animosity there. Maybe it's not even that he was necessarily angry with the Pacers, but it's just time to move on. 10 years is a long time, guys. It's his whole career. He'd never seen anything else. He'd never been an unrestricted free agent. Maybe he wanted to challenge himself. Maybe he wanted to feel wanted. Maybe he wanted to go play with Giannis. It's any number of things. We won't know until he talks about some of those things in the press conference. But say what you want about Turner. He's a smart guy. And he's doing what he thinks is best for him. I do worry that this is best for Milwaukee because I don't think that this raises Milwaukee's ceiling very much at all. I still look at that roster and I'm like, Myles Turner's a good player. I've defended Myles Turner. Myles Turner's not like a number 2 caliber player in the league. If Myles Turner's your second best player, you're not winning a championship. I think we know that. We've seen that here. And And I don't know if Milwaukee's thinking that. I thought it was a desperation. If the Pacers made the same exact move that Milwaukee did, we would be destroying them right now for how reckless and crazy it was. Because it's a reckless, crazy move to be the fourth best team in the East. Because I think that's kind of where Milwaukee is with this roster. I don't think they're better than Cleveland. I don't think they're better than New York. And then there are a whole host of teams behind them that have, Detroit, Orlando. There's some teams that have real upside behind them that could, I don't want to say surprise, but could kind of come up and jump right over them. But as far as legacies, I know I asked that question to Tony East. Myles Turner's legacy, I don't know if it matters that much because, we're not talking about a guy that was like a multiple-time All-Star or, Hall of Fame player. I did see one tweet. I was like, should the Pacers retire Myles Turner's number? I'm like, dude, are you serious? What? No, the Pacers should not retire Myles Turner's number. I mean, Jermaine O'Neal's not retired. Rick Smits is not retired. Freddie Lewis is not retired. There are probably 7, 8, 9, 10 Pacers that I would consider retiring their jersey or would be in line for that before you would go to Myles Turner just because he stuck around here for 10 years. But he was a good player, and he went through a lot, and he was the one constant of multiple eras of Pacers basketball. The immediate post Roy Hibbert, George Hill, David West, those teams that made those runs, it was Turner. So the final, the Paul George wilderness years is what I like to call them. When you had like Paul George and your second best player was C.J. Miles. No offense to C.J. Miles, but come on, man. Like, go back and look at some of those rosters, guys. It was embarrassing. Rodney Stuckey. Remember those teams? Monte Ellis. Oh, my God. And then you went into the Oladipo, Sabonis teams, and, the Pacers remade themselves, right? And those teams were fun. Boyan. Remember the Boyan game who just retired? That was fun. It was short-lived, but it was fun. And then you kind of went into, like, the T.J. Warren, Brogdon. They were trying to make the Sabonis-Turner thing work. It didn't work. It just wasn't happening. Nobody was healthy at the same time. It was a very underwhelming team just in general. And then you remade it again, and then you finally got it right. Halliburton, and then you bring in Siakam, and you draft Nembhard, and you make the Nesmith deal with the Brogdon trade to Boston, and you build together the core, and then you're a game away from an NBA championship. And in my opinion, no offense to the 98 team or the 2000, the greatest team in the Pacers NBA history. I really do feel that way. Certainly the greatest run. If pound for pound, they're not the best team. If this wasn't good enough to beat like the Reggie, Jalen Rose, Chris Mullin, Mark Jackson team. If this team wasn't good enough to beat this team, it was certainly the best run that the Pacers ever had. The most fun Pacers team. And I think that's a good endpoint. Turner leaves the franchise better than how he found it. Now, that's not all on him. That, a lot of people contributed to that. But I think as a man, at 29 years old, you give 10 years of your life to a franchise, I think he can be at peace with where he leaves it, even if the fan base is not at peace with it. I'd be cool with it. And plus, the 9-figure check helps. That would help me be at peace with a lot of things. Yeah, $27 million. Okay, yeah, I'm at peace with this decision. Cool. Let's roll with that. We come back on the show. We actually have tickets to give away, right?
That is right.
Dirks Bentley coming up here at Ruoff, and that is next Saturday. Did you do a caller number? How do you guys usually do it here? Like caller number 3 or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
That works.
Yeah, cool. Caller number 3. Let's do that right now. 239-1070. Eddie will answer it. You're our lucky winner to go see Dirks Bentley next Saturday at Ruoff. We'll come back and say goodbye to an NBA legend that I think a lot of you probably never even knew that he was an NBA legend. It's Query & Company, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. I will say in Jake's defense, this is a great song. This was always, Don't Look Back in Anger was always my favorite off that album. What's the Story, Morning Glory, because they had a couple of mega hits on there. Wonderwall, Champagne Supernova was on there, but this was always my favorite one. I don't remember if it was Noel or Liam, the two brothers that they like to just punch each other in the face. One of them went in studio with Howard Stern and did that song acoustic. And if you want to look it up on YouTube, it's awesome. Really, really good.
Just make sure you do it after 6 o'clock.
Yeah. Make sure that you do that too. That summer, so 96 is when that album came out, and I had family in they're not one of my cousins is still out there in Santa Barbara, and we used to go out in the 90s a lot and visit them. But my uncle got married in the summer of 96, and when all those albums were coming out, it was a great year for music. And it was, What's the Story, Morning Glory, and I just remember Beck's Odelay was part of that as well. And Where It's At was the big track on that. And I was 13 years old. I had pants that were like 4 sizes too big.
Throwing up the East sign.
Yeah, exactly.
East Side sign. Yeah.
I was down on State Street in Santa Barbara, California, and they had a skate shop there. Remember when like skating was cool for like 5 minutes? I still think skateboarding is cool, by the way, and I got really into rollerblading in the 90s. But anyway, I had my Discman in one of my cargo pants pockets and my headphones, and I'm listening to Where It's At, Beck, in California, and I thought I was the coolest person on earth.
I went down to Bloomington yesterday, Derek, and I was at Upstairs Pub.
Yeah.
And this guy came in on rollerblades.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, are rollerblades coming back, maybe?
I don't know how he got all the way up the stairs in those. Like, not going to fall.
Wow.
Imagine trying to go down.
I've not been in Upstairs since, Upstairs is a very different place from when I was in school there. Even though that was always, Upstairs was our nightcap. I had friends that lived at Henderson Crossing, and so they were behind like Acacia and the last of those houses over there. And we were walking distance basically to Kirkwood from there. And that was my last friends that lived in Bloomington. So I had graduated. I was done. I was like 23 years old, and they were 23. And Upstairs was always the nightcap because you'd go and you'd get an AMF, and then you'd stumble back to the apartment, and I'd crash on a futon or on the floor or whatever else. But I have not been in there since it renovated. But I still know people that are down there, and I've seen some pictures from inside Upstairs, and it looks incredible.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, and they have the old Assembly Hall scoreboard in there, right?
Yes, it was 66-0 when I went in there yesterday.
Wow, really cool. Well, I don't know about that part, but it's cool. It's weird for me now because, like, I have all of these great memories because, I went to IU, and, I met my wife at IU. I met some lifelong friends at IU. And now I work at Purdue, and I've really leaned into being a Purdue employee, and I love the people at Purdue and being part of the university and the whole deal. And like the bucket game, and like when they play in basketball, it's just like extremely awkward for me. It's weird. It'll never not be weird. And like when I go downstairs and I'm wearing stuff with the Purdue P on it, my wife's like, "What are you doing? Why are you wearing that?" I'm like, "Well, they're paying me. I gotta wear this stuff." But I kind of secretly I like wearing it. I got like gold and black Jordans and the whole deal.
Wait, really?
Oh yeah. I told you. This is the thing about me, Eddie. Anything that I do, I lean in all the way. That's just how I've always been. If I'm on the team, I am on the team, and that's how I've treated that job. And it's a wonderful place and a wonderful job, and I'm really enjoying my career shift there. But I love the chance. They're allowing me the opportunity. I took a half day, but they're allowing me the opportunity to do stuff like this. I mean, they could easily just be like, "No, you're not going to do a sports radio show. What are you talking about?" But they allow me to occasionally, fill in and do stuff like this, which is great. Sad news today, as I saw that. Actually, this happened last night. I don't know how relevant this name will be to people in Indianapolis, and this may be esoteric and very niche, even though I tweeted this out last night and it appeared to not be so niche. Frank Layden, who is a former Utah Jazz head coach and a longtime Jazz exec, he was a big basketball guy, New York guy, who ended up in Utah, which, you talk about a dichotomy there. He passed away last night at the age of 93. He had a long, fruitful life. And he was a real character in NBA circles. His son was a longtime executive as well with the Jazz, with the Knicks, and some other places too. But Frank was a bigger guy and had black, thick wireframe glasses. And he was kind of a goof. And he did videos back in the late 80s and 90s. This was immediately after his coaching career was over. And I think he was actually an exec with the Jazz at this time. And he released 2 VHS tapes, 1989 and 1990, called Dazzling Dunks and Basketball Bloopers, and then a second version of that, which I think was just like the all-new Dazzling Dunks and Basketball Bloopers. So 2 videos. And it was right in the window when I just started to become, like, sports obsessed. Like, it's just all I did, especially the NBA. I loved the NBA. And admittedly, and I'm scared to do this on an Indianapolis radio station, just a huge, gigantic New York Knicks fan and follower. Patrick Ewing and at that time it was Johnny Newman and Mark Jackson and Trent Tucker and Kiki Vandeweghe and those were the guys that they had traded for Charles Oakley. They traded Bill Cartwright. Rick Pitino was their head guy. I mean, I'm talking like way back, and then into Stu Jackson, and then into I think it was John McLeod in between there, and then Pat Riley. But when these videos came out, those were the Knicks teams that I was watching. And Frank and Marv Albert, who at that time was the TV voice of the Knicks, and he did national broadcast too, but he was the TV voice of the Knicks on MSG. He was the host. And I just watched the hell out of those videotapes just over and over again. And it was just all kinds of highlights and dunks and bloopers, exactly what it was. And you could watch it on YouTube right now and check it out, and you could see how, like, kind of stupid it was. But when you're 8 years old, you don't really care. And at that time, we didn't have YouTube. I wasn't able to just grab a phone and just look at highlights. I was just so thirsty to consume NBA content that I would just come home from school and watch those tapes over and over again. And I'll always think about Frank Layden simply because of those tapes. It's weird, but some guy that was the head coach of the Utah Jazz, a team that's completely irrelevant to me, was super relevant to me becoming the NBA fan that I did. So that's what I thought about with his passing. But there were other VHS tapes that we rocked out. I remember there was one called NBA Superstars, and I think it came with a Sports Illustrated subscription. And it was music videos, highlight videos that were like music videos, but with star players. So it was like Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas, and Larry Bird. I think that was maybe Hakeem Olajuwon too. I think those are the players. And Jordan was synced to Take My Breath Away. And JMV would know all the artists associated with. I don't know who did Take My Breath Away. Larry Bird was Mellencamp Small Town. Charles Barkley was The Warrior, like shooting at the walls of heartache, bang, bang. That was Charles Barkley. Isaiah was The Right Stuff from New Kids. I don't remember what the other songs were. But that was another VHS tape. Like, I watched the hell out of it just over and over and over again. And now it's all up on YouTube, so you can kind of re-enjoy that stuff. But it's just funny. Like, if you're a certain age, I think you know what I'm talking about. If you're, Eddie's age or younger, you have no idea. But, John, you're older than me, but you remember those old VHS tapes that you just watch it over and over and over again, right?
Yes, all the time.
Well, I'm talking sports-related, but yeah.
Oh, sports-related. I thought you were talking about 80s porn.
those ones that you'd hide under your mattress and things like that. But
no, I think I still have some. I used to. We had an old school satellite dish, the big moonraker type of things in the backyard, and you got absolutely everything. And S118, that particular satellite channel was American Triple Ecstasy, and it was on from 6 in the evening until 6 in the morning. Wasn't allowed to go in the afternoon with your porn.
I guess not.
Yeah, no afternoon porn. But
I used to remember the scramble TV.
I would roll tape and take it to school.
Where you you'd be able to hear some of the audio, so you had a general idea of what was happening, but it was like the scrambled, like warbled antenna stuff.
I introduced a lot of people at Eastern Green to the Lynn family, Amber Lynn, Ginger Lynn, and Portia Lynn. Not related.
Which are all their real names. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
What do you have on tap for the show today?
We're going to do Tom Dienhart. I want to talk a little inside. I know you talked about that with Mike DeCourcy expansion. I'll be honest with you. Even with Indiana State, I thought Indiana State and the NIT was better than them making the tournament and getting bounced in game one. I don't know if that's defeatist or what, but I so enjoyed the NIT. So this expansion, I think, is really stupid. So I'm with DeCourcy on that. So we'll talk about that, a little bit of football with Dean Hart. I got Mike Chappell coming on as we near the Colts stuff. And the Pacers, Cavaliers later on tonight, right? How'd you do today? Did you have fun?
Yeah, man, it's great. It's like riding a bike, right? It's like you hop back on here. It's nice to do. And honestly, for July 10th, we had a crap ton to talk about.
How about that?
So it ended up working out.
The Pacers basically went all the way until the 4th of July.
Yeah.
That's pure insanity right there.
And even the Fever, man, like, when I was doing this last, they weren't a topic, really, and now they are.
I had to put off my interview with Howie Mandel because the Pacers are still.
Did you really?
Oh, I go, man, Howie, I don't have time for it right now, brother.
I never had Howie Mandel on. I'd like to have Howie Mandel on sometime. Well, enjoy it, man. Thanks for letting me come in here and hang out for a little bit. And thanks to Eddie Garrison, and thanks for all of you for listening. The Ride with JMV is next. It's 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.